this boy stole a legendary grimoire. His name was Aster. He was nothing more than an obedient dog of the Declan family, the most powerful noble house on the continent. He spent his entire life serving them until the day the nobles made his friends disappear. That was when he stole a forbidden grimoire. But before he could escape, the head of the family appeared. This man was the most powerful mage. Right in front of him, Aster destroyed the grimoire. The noble showed no mercy. He left Aster to burn alive in the flames. But when Aster opened his eyes, he had returned years into the past. And because of the grimoire, a mark of fire appeared on his body, a forbidden power that will turn Aster into a monster of magic. And this time, the Declan family will be destroyed. Remembering a day, a winged creature soared through the sky with total freedom. Flying in circles, the winged serpent roared with all its might in the air. Hit squarely, the monster plummets from the sky at high speed, crashes violently into the ground, kicking up dust everywhere. Fallen and wounded, he watched it all happen right before his eyes. Looking at the sky, he was just a member of the great magic house of Declan. That's why he decided to retire from his old life. Back in the present, the sky was now dark and filled with heavy clouds. Then a mysterious crow appears on the scene, watching everything from above. As feathers fall, the crow announces that only one opponent remains standing. Under that sky, the protagonist finally faces his last adversary on the hill. With a smile, the enemy says he was hiding his true abilities. Holding the book, he hears his rival ask if it's a magic tome, but he retorts that from now on, he'll be the one asking the questions. Activating his magic, his rival says that power doesn't belong to a mercenary. Confirming the suspicion, the man clenches his fists and agrees with his statement. He then asks if the young man thought they came all this way just for one thing. When asked how to use the book, he replies that he simply doesn't know. The rival then realizes he doesn't even know how to use the tome he was guarding. Seeing how valuable the item is, he orders his adversary to hand over the book. With a smile, the enemy offers a deal to spare his life. But the young man questions what power a mere manager would have to keep that promise. Then he asks the man if he has any last words for him. Suddenly, footsteps approach, and the protagonist turns to face the new threat. With sharp instincts, he braces himself for what's coming his way. In the distance, a powerful figure emerges, and the rival praises the young man's perception. Leaning on his cane, the newcomer says it's a pleasure to be there with them. He then introduces himself as Farron van Declan, the head of the local magic house. With a serious look, Farron announces he'll take the tome and they'll talk later. In a flashback, House Declan is shown as the strongest family in the East. Facing the young man, Farron's figure was imposing and quite threatening. Then he breaks into a confident smile as if he already knows the outcome of the battle. But the young man just watches him, saying this whole situation is a drag. Completely confused, Farron is left speechless by the boy's unexpected response. He then accuses him of being shameless for trying to steal his prize. Laughing at the accusation, Farron just lets out a short mocking chuckle. Standing there, the two face each other from a distance, preparing for the imminent confrontation. Looking back, the young man feels the overwhelming power coming from the mighty leader. Stomping his foot, Farron says he'll get straight to the point. He then proposes that the young man return to House Declan. Farron then praises his talent, saying they should have noticed it much sooner. He continues saying that even coming from a low background, the young man had great skill. Asking how high he could fly, Farron offers him the wings of House Declan. Asking him to join them, he calls him back to the family's side. Meanwhile, a winged creature flies freely among the clouds. Hearing he still has to return the tome, he simply agrees to the condition. Satisfied, Farron says they can begin, but the young man interrupts him with a condition. With a smile, he says that if Farron gives him the leader's position, he'll consider it. Pointing at the manager, he asks if Farron was really watching their fight. Suddenly, the manager is hit by a spell, screaming from the direct impact. He then sarcastically asks how many people have been defeated by that same attack. Unfazed, Farron just watches the scene with a very serious expression. Farron then says this is how things will be, warning that the young man could die. Next to the fallen body, he realizes the leader wasn't wrong in his warning. Planting his feet firmly on the ground, he prepares to continue the fight against Farron. With a confident smile, he charges forward, yelling that the leader is indeed not wrong. Their powers then clash with tremendous force, creating a huge impact. He shouts that you only know the outcome after you test your strength. Seeing his determination, Farron warns that he needs to put the young man in his place. He then prepares a new attack, concentrating magic in the palm of his hand. Launching an attack, Farron creates pillars of energy that rush toward the protagonist. Calmly, the leader just watches the scene, holding his cane with ease. Caught by surprise, the young man sees the magic circle form right in front of him. Trying to resist, he charges through the attack to close the distance, but Farron easily dodges, showing no openings in his defense. Counterattacking, Farron lands a blow and asks if he was lost in thought. He then says that some things are obvious even without a need to test strengths. Preparing another spell, a huge magic symbol appears in front of his hand. Farron warns that the distance between them is one of those obvious things. Then a powerful attack hits the young man, causing a massive explosion. After the smoke clears, he asks if the boy is ready to talk. Looking at the destruction, Farron waits patiently for an answer from his young opponent. Then he says he wouldn't believe him even if he bowed and came back. But the young man clasps his hands, beginning to focus his energy to continue. With a smile, he shouts that Farron is absolutely right not to believe him. Unleashing a powerful attack, he yells that he's tired of being treated like a dog. His power then strikes the ground with devastating force right in front of him. Furious, he shouts that he doesn't want to go back to being a guard dog. Tapping his cane on the ground, Farron finds the whole scene simply pathetic. Farron then launches a devastating counterattack with a blast of pure energy. From a distance, he is seen at the center of a huge red magic circle. Warning that he's about to show him, he demonstrates what truly overwhelming power is. Surrounded by the energy, he looks up and calls him a bastard. In a flashback, a violent storm with lightning fell from the sky that night. That day, he remembers looking up at the sky, feeling very tired. That's when he saw the winged serpent flying freely among the clouds. That was the reason he had looked at the sky that day. Back in the present, he's on the ground, and Farron praises him for holding on. Farron then asks if he felt the vast difference in power between them. Acknowledging his strength, Farron asks if they can now finish their conversation. Covered in wounds, he asks if Farron wants him to go back to being a mercenary. But Farron replies that he wasn't asking him to go back to being a mercenary. He then reveals that he wants him as the new head of the powerful Bongshin family. As the strongest clan, they wanted him to swear loyalty as a vassal family. Holding the book, he understands that this was Farron's goal from the very beginning. Farron then says he underestimates his own value, wanting both him and the tome. Sitting on the ground, the young man watches Farron, who stands waiting for his final decision. He then hands over the book, and Farron praises him for making the right choice. Extending his hand, Farron says with a smile that this resolves all his crimes. He says that now only glory remains, but the young man activates something in the book. Seeing what's happening, Farron asks what he thinks he's doing. With a smile, he says he'd hand over the book if Farron doesn't mind ashes. Annoyed, Farron threatens him, but the young man tells him to shut up and listen. Explaining his reasons, he says he only kept the item for the money. He then asks if Farron heard about the mercenary devoured by the young master of He then reveals that the magic was forbidden and that it devoured his comrades. Asked about revenge, he denies it, saying everyone knew the risks of that life. With a determined look, he just continues, explaining his true motivation for everything. He just wanted to make sure his friends got everything they ever wanted. But he explains that to do so, an absurd amount of money would be needed. Saying he's decided to retire, he warns that he's not going back to the kennel. Considering those his last words, he simply snaps his fingers, activating his plan. Without hesitation, Farron unleashes the blue flame, a power that never goes out. Farron then tells him to burn and regret the choice he made, but the young man shouts back saying he regrets absolutely nothing. He says he'd rather die than go back to being Declan's guard dog. Amidst the flames, he simply starts laughing at the whole situation. Shouting loudly, he says he's never felt so free in his entire life. With no regrets, he swears he'll get his revenge if he is ever reborn. The scene changes, and the wind begins to gather around a new warrior. Noticing that everything has stopped, he wonders what the hell is going on. Then the magic tome appears out of nowhere, floating right in front of him. Raising his hand, he tries to grab the book as it floats upward. Then a strange magic seal forms on his chest, leaving him very confused. Understanding nothing, he screams out loud, asking what is happening. Holding a bowl, he's confused when a coin suddenly drops into it. On the floor of a hallway, he remembers that just moments before, he was burning to death. With a nervous expression, he realizes something here feels very strange. Looking out at the city, he feels the place is familiar, as if he's returned. Seeing his own hands on the ground, he notices they look much younger than a memory surfaces, and he finally understands where he is. Kneeling on the street, he was in the gray zone where he begged for change before all this started. In disbelief, he touches his chest and wonders if he really went back in time. Now a clean blue sky shone with a very bright sun high above. The old city's buildings looked exactly as he remembered them. Near a lake, he kneels on the grass trying to understand what happened. Seeing his reflection in the water, he confirms it was him, but with a youthful appearance. But touching his chest, he realizes the mark of the seal was still there. Sitting on the grass, he understands the magic tome definitely did something. He then reflects on how important the book must have been for Farron to come in person. Deciding to accept the situation, he thinks that, in the end, this was a good thing. Sitting by the riverbank, he realizes everything is too real to be a dream. Reaching his hand to the sky, he feels not just alive, but completely renewed. Full of confidence, he feels that now, anything he does will succeed. Then he clenches his fist, wondering what success really meant now. Sitting there, he remembers a dream he and his friends used to have. In a flashback, he recalls that it was also the dream of his old companions. The reason he had retired was his close friend named Astor. Astor explains that they were born with nothing. No food, clothes, or education. The young man said not eating was the worst part, but Astor disagreed. Then Astor asks what he thinks dragged their lives into the gutter, but his friend insists on the topic, while the young man says he's fine with it. Seeing his friend's stubbornness, Astor gets annoyed and decides to speak his mind once and for all. Looking at the horizon, he reveals that the lack of education was the most bitter part. He says that if they had studied, they wouldn't be living like slaves to those nobles. With a smile, he reveals what he really wants to do when he finally retires. Sitting on the grass, he says his big dream is to build a library for everyone. It would be a place where anyone could read books for free without any distinction. But he raises his arm, saying he wants to take this plan a step further. His plan was to build a giant tower with all kinds of books inside. With a wicked smile, he reveals he would put Declan's secret manual at entrance. That way, even the poorest could get a copy of the family's techniques. The book would have their crest on the cover and the most valuable secrets inside. But he understands that the problem now is how to get his hands on the manual. Putting it off for later, he says that's a problem for his future self. Suddenly, he's hit by a strong punch that catches him by surprise. Lying on the ground, a boy kicks him and yells that he's finally found him. Continuing the assault, the boy asks if he was hiding and looking to die. Even while being beaten, he tries to figure out who this guy is and if it's an ambush. With a swift move, he grabs his rival's foot, remembering he's a veteran. Seeing his rival's surprise, he states that he was hit a total of 7 times. Still on the ground, he warns that he'll return the favor with 70 strikes. With a pained expression, the attacker just stares at the young man without any reaction. With a quick move, he lands a direct punch on the attacker's chin. Looking at his hand, he realizes something feels very strange. Angered by the blow, the rival retaliates with a strong punch to his face. He then continues the attack with a violent kick, knocking the young man to the ground. Lying on the grass, he curls up from the impact of the sequence of blows. Using his feet, he kicks a nearby stone, hitting the attacker. Struck squarely, the rival loses his balance and falls backward into the river. Seeing his chance, he gets up to finally escape from that place. Getting out of the water, the attacker spits and glares angrily at the young man. He then starts to run while his rival yells at him not to flee. Looking back, he warns that he'll remember the attacker's face. Even as he backs away, he makes it clear this is a tactical retreat, not a surrender. Looking up at the sky between the buildings, he reflects on his new and difficult situation. Sitting alone in an alley, he realizes his current problem is quite serious. Seeing his sprained wrist, he notes that his body is much weaker now. So he decides that before thinking about the tower, he first needs to strengthen his body. Suddenly, a voice comes out of nowhere asking if he was hungry. A mysterious boy then appears in front of him, standing right in the middle of the alley. When the boy asks if he knows him, the young man simply says no. With a sideways glance, he had already expected the boy wouldn't know him. Sizing up the expensive clothes, he concludes this is a fallen young noble. The boy introduces himself as Damien and says his mother's name is Bianca. Annoyed by this information, he asks if the boy is out of his mind, but the boy just stares at him and says he doesn't actually have a mother. He then says he has no father and tells him they should go their separate ways. Despite the warning, the boy remains still, arms crossed without moving. Asking if he's not going to leave, the young man hears him say he'll go with him. Angrily, he tells the boy to get out of there, but he's completely ignored. Then the boy asks if his injuries don't hurt after the fight. With a smile, the boy uses magic and says he'll heal all his wounds. Suddenly, the young man's hand is enveloped by a powerful healing spell. The boy reveals with a smile that it was just a simple magic touch. Startled by the power, he realizes this is much more than a touch. He recognizes the secret technique of the Blander family, the light of healing. His instincts then warn him that something dangerous and dirty has entangled him. Seeing the magic, he wonders why a Blander child would be here. The boy then stares at him, tilting his head in a very strange way. With a smile, the boy asks if the young man had just called him. Startled, he finally remembers who this boy with the strange eyes was. He was a member of the Blander lineage, known for having different colored eyes. Known as the Monster of Blander, he was the Undying Butcher. The monster's name was none other than Damien von Blander, a truly dangerous being. But instead of attacking, the boy crouches down and starts watching ants. Looking at the boy, the young man is confused by his behavior at that moment. In a flashback, he remembers when he went to the Blander house on Declan's orders. Back then, his companions complained, saying Declan should solve her own problems. Running through the forest, one of them mentions a monster that has killed dozens of people. Surprised, the other asks if it was an ogre-type monster or something similar. But upon arriving at the scene, he's completely paralyzed by the sight before him. Facing the burning hall, he and his friends realize it wasn't an ogre. Inside, a person was mercilessly tearing another apart with their bare hands. Using healing magic on himself, he fought and laughed like a madman. That was the famous monster of Blander, the butcher who never died. His name was Damien von Blander, the direct heir of that powerful noble family. Back in the present, the boy just watches ants on the ground with great curiosity. Confused, the young man just stares at the bizarre scene, finding it all very strange. He then wonders why the Blander heir would be in such a simple place. Suddenly, the boy stands up and says the only important thing is food. With a smile, Damien invites him to eat, saying it will make him healthy. Agreeing with the boy, he gets up and asks if he has any money. Just then, Damien shows a basket full of coins, leaving the young man speechless. Placing a hand on his shoulder, the young man suddenly calls him by name. With a smile, he gives a thumbs up and says that from now on, they are friends. He then hugs Damien and says friends should share what they have. Excited, he invites Damien to eat, and the boy replies by calling him friend. At sunset, he says that when asked what he has, he'll answer that he has a friend. At night, the city slept under a starry sky with a bright moon. After eating, he burps with a full belly, completely satisfied with the meal. Sitting on the bed, he feels refreshed after a nice hot bath. Up there, he sees Damien and asks him what he's doing. The boy replies that he's always slept on the street and didn't know about the house. He then sits on the bed and remembers something he needed to confirm. Kneeling on the bed, Damien reveals he doesn't have a father around either, but he denies it. And Damien insists he doesn't, starting a pointless argument. Annoyed, he asks Damien if he doesn't have a mother around either. Damien then says she's not there, and if she's not there, she doesn't exist. Trying to understand the situation, he asks how long the boy has been alone. Lying in bed, he wonders if Damien is being chased by someone, but the boy replies that he naps a lot, leaving him completely confused by the answer. With a smile, Damien says he takes naps twice a day, every day. Lying in bed, he calculates that the boy has been on the run for 3 or 4 days. Looking at the pillow beside him, he observes the empty bed in the room. He then stares at the room, thinking about how to seize this new opportunity in his life. In despair, he throws himself onto the bed, realizing that a madman is different from the very beginning. Hugging the pillow, he decides he can act as a babysitter and build a connection. With the boy asleep, he thinks this will help him face the Declan family. He then remembers that he first needs to take care of something much more important. Sitting on the bed, he tells Damien not to bother him as he's going to lie down. But Damien shows up and asks if he's practicing his breathing, lying on top of him. Lying in bed, he remembers that in his past life, limits were clear. That's why he infiltrated various places to steal spells, nearly dying in the process. In doing so, he learned random night techniques, spiritual magic, and even alchemy. But before he died, he encountered the overwhelming power of Farron von Declan. It was then that he witnessed a power that was a true natural catastrophe. Opening his eyes, he swears that this time, he'll do everything differently. The spell he will learn is the celestial origin technique of the Declan family. With a smile, he remembers memorizing the technique for research in his past life. He then begins to practice the powerful breathing technique he learned before. Feeling an intense heat, he screams from the pain of lava in his body. Trying to concentrate, he is startled when he notices something unexpected in his energy. He notices impurities in his mana and wonders why they are there. That was a high-level spell used only by elite noble mages. The spell was used only on direct bloodlines to burn away the impurities in their mana. The result of all this was a process called the purifying mana rain. Feeling the pain, he screams loudly as his body undergoes the purification process. Getting up from the bed, he wonders how much time has passed since he started. Beside him, the boy Damien slept peacefully, hugging his soft pillow. Looking at his hand, he realizes his mana has been purified and the impurities are gone. Even with this power, he knows that defeating the Declan family is still a daunting task. Staring at Farron's image, he feels it would be impossible even if he were reborn 100 times. But he clenches his fist tightly, knowing one thing is certain now. With a confident smile, he feels his chances of winning have just increased. Outside, the sky was clear, and the sun shone brightly over the city. Excited, Damien points to his hair, saying it's now a brown shade. With this disguise, he thinks the boy won't be caught by the Blander family. Then Damien calls him friend and asks what they'll do from now on. With a smirk, he faces the boy and prepares his next move. He announces that the plan now is to simply cause a little chaos in the city. Outside, the bully yawns and says the weather is good for a nap. Seeing the two approach, the bully is completely confused about what's happening. Walking down the street, the protagonist finally finds the bully who attacked him earlier. Annoyed, the bully asks where he'd been and why he disappeared. Without hesitating, he lunges forward and lands a powerful punch right in the stomach. With his rival on the ground, he announces that he's finally found him in the right place. He then warns that the bully will take 123 hits first. Suddenly, other boys show up and ask what's happening in the alley. Right after, the whole gang of bullies gathers, recognizing the young man. Seeing all those familiar faces, he just gives them a very sinister smile. Ready for a fight, he wonders how far he'll get today. Meanwhile, Damien just watches the scene and asks if this is a game. He kicks off the fight with a punch straight to one of the bullies' faces, then he strikes another in the gut, using his mana to boost his strength. Without stopping for a second, he takes down another enemy with an overhead blow. Damien just watches from a distance as his new friend fights them all. To keep up the assault, he channels his mana and clenches his fist tightly. Watching the fight, Damien gets super excited and yells that this is just incredible. He uses the fight to show Damien what truly incredible looks like. Completely impressed, the boy repeats once more that the scene is incredible. After the fight, Damien approaches one of the bullies lying on the ground. Crouching beside him, Damien heals him, saying it won't hurt at all. Now healed, the boy says thanks, but is grabbed by the protagonist from behind. With a sinister grin, he asks the bully how many times he was hit. After it's all over, he gets into the water to rest a bit and catch his breath. He attacks the leader from behind, landing a direct hit to his head. He asks how many times he was hit, and the boy says he's already lost count. Excited, Damien asks if it's his turn to join the fun too. Terrified, the bully screams for them to stop, begging for his life. At this, the bully begs them to stop, saying he only knows how to count up to double digits. That night, the full moon shone brightly in the sky, illuminating the entire city. Lined up, the bullies thank him for everything that happened that day. With a smile, he says he's proud of the energy well spent on each of them. He then becomes thoughtful, looking to the side with a serious and focused expression. With a smile, the group's leader asks if they can finally leave. But the bully stammers that this is his and his group's home. Unfazed, he says that's tough, and the group decides to leave. Watching everyone leave, he just observes the scene with a serious expression. With a smirk, he thinks to himself that life is indeed very hard. Looking down from above, he waves to the street as a mysterious figure approaches. Suddenly, a hooded figure rushes forward at high speed, shattering the ground. Sensing the presence, he notes that the movement is fast and stealthy. He realizes the enemy is probably someone pursuing them. He then wonders how he was found since he was being very careful. Even with his purified mana, he knows the situation is not good at all. Standing under the moon, he remembers always facing situations like this without power. He then gathers all his mana, compressing the power into a single point. Concentrating the energy in his hand, he feels that this amount is more than enough. With a determined look, he prepares to face the enemy. Seeing that this is his only chance, he leaps toward the pursuer. But before he can attack, he's interrupted by a noise from below. Looking back, he sees a figure falling from the sky and is completely stunned. The man lands right in front of him, desperately shouting for young Master Damien. In shock, Damien recognizes the man and shouts the name of Alfredo, his butler. Alfredo then hugs him, saying he couldn't sleep right from worrying so much about him. The butler grabs Damien and says he won't let him go until they're back home. Watching the scene, he understands that the boy really did run away from his family. Embarrassed, the butler says he's making a scene in front of the guests. Holding Damien, he introduces himself as Alfredo, the butler of the Blandu family. With a smile, Alfredo invites him to go with them since Damien likes him. Surprised, he wonders if he should really go to the Blander family's house. Without understanding their intentions, he knows the family's rule is to reject the unclean. With a smile, he decides it doesn't matter since he wanted to forge a connection. He thinks their territory is convenient and that he can visit Xenian Academy. Thanking them for their help, he agrees to go with them and waits for the carriage. Grabbing his clothes, he feels he strayed a bit from his original plan. Dressed, he gets ready and wonders if the Blander family's food is any good. That night, the full moon shone brightly in the sky over the sleeping city. Arriving at the mansion, the carriage stops and the coachman announces they've reached their destination. Stepping out of the carriage, he sets foot on the grounds of their huge and luxurious mansion. Looking around, he wonders if this is his first time here officially. Facing the mansion, he sees the guards lined up waiting for their arrival. Saying that it's late, Alfredo asks a maid named Lancy to take care of the guests. The maid then asks Damien to follow her, but he just stares at her with a smile. Suddenly, the maid starts screaming that she made a terrible mistake. That night, the mansion was silent under the bright light of the full moon. Walking through the corridors, Alfredo prepares to meet the head of the Blander family. Stopping in front of the door, he knocks twice and waits for permission. Opening the door, he enters and announces his return after bringing Damien back. He reports that the boy was in the city's 7th black and white zone. Inside, Damien watches the woman sitting at her desk in the enormous and luxurious office. Suddenly, a teacup explodes with the woman's rage upon hearing the news. Surprised, she asks if he was really in the 7th black and white zone. Worried, she asks if Damien is okay and threatens whoever hurt him. Calmly, Alfredo asks her to calm down and listen to what he has to say. Seated, she listens to the butler attentively, waiting for more details about the situation. After listening, she stands up and says it's a huge relief. Agreeing, the butler says it's a relief for everyone, including the person involved. He then reflects that no one would be able to stop the fury of the Blood Witch. With a smile, the woman says he worked hard and thanks him for his effort. But Alfredo bows and says it was his duty to do so. Then he reveals there's something unusual about the situation that needs to be noted. He's referring to the new friend that young Damien made during his escape. Alfredo explains that the boy noticed his presence and was preparing to counterattack. He remembers the energy he saw in the boy's hand when he found him. It was a mana bullet, a technique that required very precise control. Interested, the woman says that's impressive talent for a child from that zone. That is why, he says, he would like to ask the matron for a small favor. With a serious look, he faces the woman and prepares to make his request. The scene changes. He's now in front of the mansion listening to the butler's proposal. With open arms, Alfredo asks him to become the successor. Looking at the butler, he is completely shocked by the unexpected proposal. Confident, Alfredo believes there's no way the boy will refuse such a great opportunity. But with a single word, he simply denies the proposal, leaving the butler shocked. Not understanding the response, the butler stares at him and calls him boy again. With a calm posture, he asks the butler if he heard his refusal correctly. Confused, Damien asks what Asta means by the word friend. Hugging the boy, Asta thanks him but says he prefers things as they are. Watching the scene, Alfredo finally seems to understand the situation between the two young men. He reflects that Asta, born with nothing, has grown arrogant because of his talent. Then Alfredo tells the boy that the world is much vaster. Asta agrees, replying that he knows the world is indeed not small. He continues, saying that Asta must feel capable of conquering anything, but the boy denies it, stating that he doesn't actually feel that way. That unexpected response leaves the butler, Alfredo, visibly irritated by his audacity. He then compares Asta to a goblin in a canyon, oblivious to the dangers. Asta corrects him, saying he actually considers himself more like a wyvern. This answer creates huge tension between them, shattering the calm of the place. Furious, Alfredo stomps his foot hard, shouting that the boy knows nothing. He warns that he will personally show extent of his mistake. Shouting, he promises to teach him how vast and terrible the world truly is. The next day, Asta is taken to the imposing headquarters of House Blander. Entering the main hall, Alfredo introduces the place to the young boy. Nearby, other apprentices watch their arrival with great curiosity. Lined up, the young talents of the house greet the head butler with great respect. Alfredo then asks what Asta thinks, saying they are official talents. Analyzing the group, Asta realizes that House Blander is no joke. He notices that despite their youth, everyone there is incredibly well trained. But soon after, a subtle smile appears on the boy's face. To him, he just had to look in their eyes to see they were just goblins. Excited, Alfredo asks if he will finally accept his proposal now, but Asta turns away, saying he hates the light, leaving Alfredo shocked. At that moment, a hand rises, catching the head butler's attention. Winster, one of the apprentices, speaks up with a very confident smile. He says that Asta only refused because he hasn't felt their power, so he offers to give Asta a bit of that necessary experience. Winster then clarifies that it's not a duel, just a taste of magic. Despite the arrogance, Alfredo thinks the idea isn't actually bad. Turning to Asta, he proposes a simple duel against the other boy. He perfectly understands that he has become a huge nuisance to everyone there. He realizes the others see him as a lucky vagrant. Asta then asks if he can choose his opponent and receives permission. Pointing his finger, he chooses Winster as his first opponent in the challenge. Continuing, he points to 4 other apprentices, shocking everyone in the hall. He then announces that he will fight all 5 of them at the same time. Taunting them, he asks if they are scared and tells them to die. Seeing the boy's audacity, Alfredo is surprised and then smiles. Starting to laugh, he says that this is the spirit of a successor. Alfredo asks if he'll take responsibility, and Asta confirms without hesitation. He warns that if Asta lasts 1 minute, he will get a gift. Asta then realizes the old man is trying to force him to become the successor. Accepting the challenge, Asta takes his position as the instructor questions the danger of the fight. Alfredo replies that's exactly why, as the boy's stubbornness needs to be broken. Desperate, the instructor thinks his career is over if he hurts the master's guest. Watching closely, Damien gestures for the 2 beside him to be quiet. In desperation, the instructor begs the young master to stop Alfredo and save his friend. All excited, Damien says he's also shocked and eager to see what happens. Disbelieving the response, the instructor just puts his hand on his face, completely disappointed. Lancey then warns that if he gets involved, Lady Gamma will scold him. Seeing the hesitation, Alfredo orders the instructor to start the fight, and he nervously agrees. Sighing, he thinks that orders are orders and that he did his best. Lancey just watches the scene unfold with a very serious expression on her face. Going to the center, the instructor says he'll be right back and asks them not to interfere. With a smile, Damien confirms he got the message and will stay quiet. Already in the middle of the arena, the instructor begins to explain that the duel will be turn-based, but Asta interrupts him, saying the fight should be a free-for-all. Announcing the rules, the instructor says the fight will go until surrender. Prepared for the duel, both sides face each other with confidence in their eyes. Thinking silently, Winster vows to crush that vagrant punk. Giving the signal, the instructor shouts for the combat to finally begin. Advancing quickly, Asta lands a clean hit right on Winster's chest. Completely in shock, Winster falls backward, unable to even react. Unable to believe what he's seeing, another apprentice reacts with total shock and despair. Shortly after, all 5 opponents were already on the ground, defeated. Taking a step forward, Asta walks toward the frightened instructor. He then says he'll teach the lesson, starting with never underestimating the small. Fallen, Winster recognizes the magic, thinking it's basic and useless control. Then Asta continues, preparing to teach his second lesson. Warning them not to judge, he launches several projectiles towards the group. Hit dead on, they are all thrown far away with great force. Finally, he prepares to state his third and final lesson. Facing the apprentice, Asta warns that the world is vast and bitter. He then lands a powerful uppercut, easily sending his opponent flying. Smiling, he says he will inject all these experiences into them, telling them to learn. In a panic, the instructor yells that it isn't real magic. Asta simply confirms that, yes, it is magic as he moves on to the next one. Landing another blow, he reveals he's using so-called physical magic. Unable to believe his eyes, the instructor watches the scene with a panicked expression. In the background, the other apprentices look on with fear and surprise. Leaving everyone on the ground, Asta displays his overwhelming strength. Impressed, Alfredo thinks the magic was compressed at least 5 times. He imagines that if that attack had hit him, the result would have been devastating. He realizes Asta possesses innate mana control. On top of that, he wonders how the boy is so good at fighting. Just then, a firm voice calls out to Alfredo, completely interrupting the moment. Turning quickly, he sees who just arrived in the middle of the hall. Arriving on the scene, Mrs. Gamo appears accompanied by the maid, Lancy. Seeing her arrival, the instructor realizes the situation has become very serious. Relieved, he thinks that Miss Lancy has arrived to save them. She then asks Alfredo what exactly happened there. With a stern look, she questions the butler about the so-called simple test. Pointing to the chaos, she asks if he really calls that a test. As he's called, Damien turns, surprised to see a magic circle forming. Giving an order, she tells Alfredo to gather the apprentices and get them out of there. Nodding, Alfredo accepts the order without any questions. Then she tells Damien to go back to his room for now. Asking the same of Asta, she tells him to return to his room as well. Calling the instructor over, she glares at him as he tries to explain himself. Without hesitation, she informs him that he's fired, leaving the man in shock. As night falls, the mansion is finally quiet after the commotion. She tells Alfredo he went too far, and he accepts any punishment. Picking up a teacup, she continues her serious conversation with the butler. Asking about the fight, she wants to know if Damien helped the boy. Alfredo says no, but hesitates before continuing his explanation. He finally says the boy was incredibly good at beating people up. Apologizing, he returns to the topic of the magic bullet he had mentioned. Explaining further, he says Asta compressed the magic to increase its power. This proves he has incredible skill with his mana. She then concludes the boy possesses excellent mana control. He defeated 5 apprentices by himself using only a single magic bullet in the fight. Asking about the proposal, she hears from Alfredo that Asta rejected it. Picking up her cup, she simply says she understands the situation perfectly. Deciding to reevaluate him, she orders Alfredo to bring Asta to her. A short time later, Asta enters the room closely followed by the butler. Welcoming the boy, she invites him to sit in front of her. He asks why he was summoned, and she confirms she wanted to see him. But before they begin, she places a golden box on the table explaining the situation. She says she heard about the gift Alfredo promised him. Asta remembers the promise, a little surprised by the gesture. He thinks to himself that he didn't expect to receive the gift so soon, especially not from her. With a slight smile, she allows him to open the gift now. He then takes the golden box and slowly begins to open it. Opening the box, Asa is completely shocked by what he sees inside. Inside is a high-quality item given only to the best recruits. Suspicious, he thinks such a valuable gift must have some hidden intention. With a calm smile, Mrs. Gamo simply observes the boy's reaction. She tells him to accept it without worry as both a thank you and an apology. Asta asks if accepting the item obligates him to join them. He then asks if it's poisoned, but she denies it. Wanting to be sure, he asks if there are no strings attached, and she confirms. Thanking her, he finally accepts the gift as Damien tries to grab it from the table. Satisfied with his gain, he puts the item away and waits for her to continue. She then informs him she has a proposal, confirming his suspicions. Calling Asta's name, she places a hand on young Damien's head. She offers him a spot to attend the academy alongside her son. Surprised, he asks about the academy, and she begins to explain. She reveals that Damien was supposed to enroll last year, but he refused. She says she didn't expect him to run away so suddenly. That's why, she explains, Damien likes him and would agree to go with him. Understanding the situation, Asta realizes this is a big problem for them. A memory then reveals Damien refusing to go to the academy. Despite everything, this chance at the academy seems like a good opportunity for him. Even though it sounds good, the proposal feels like a leash being put around his neck. Deciding not to commit, he says he'll think about it. Before answering, he says he's curious about something else. Curious. She asks why he rejected Alfredo's proposal earlier. Looking toward the door, Asta prepares to give his final answer. With a faint smile, he begins to explain his reason to her. He reveals that his knees are precious and weren't made for kneeling. Not understanding his answer, she asks what he meant by that. That unexpected answer leaves the butler, Alfredo, completely speechless in the corner. Seeing his audacity, the butler turns and calls the boy's name. That same night, tranquility finally seems to reign over the huge mansion. Inside his room, Asta takes a deep breath, focusing to begin his training. As he meditates, he senses the item's power, feeling his mana increase drastically. He also notices his physique is changing due to his constitution. Seeing its efficiency, he concludes the result is better than he expected. Thinking about the academy, he feels his answer is already decided. Despite the advantages, he still can't fully trust the proposal. To him, it all feels too much like a trap waiting for him. Deciding to go for a run, he gets up and heads for the door. Opening his bedroom door, he prepares to leave. Just then, a voice stops him, asking if he's the guy named Astor. Leaning against the wall, a young man with light hair eyes him suspiciously. He then thinks that this family is always a huge nuisance. With a curt reply, he says no and tries to close the door. Confused, the young man comments on the faded gray hair he sees. Stating that it all fits, he says Asta's gaze is really annoying. Touching his hair, Asta explains that the color can change depending on the light. Then he strikes a cute pose, asking how anyone could find his eyes annoying. Seeing this, the other guy is left completely speechless and confused. He apologizes for the mistake, saying that his eyes actually seem kind. At that moment, Alfredo comes running to clear up the misunderstanding from the previous night. Desperately, he yells that being a butler doesn't require wearing out your knees this much. Asta just keeps an innocent smile on his face, listening to the explanation. Realizing it was all an act, the other young man is shocked to have been deceived. Furious, he shouts that he was right about his dead goblin eyes. Accepting he's been caught, Asta listens as the young man accuses him of lying shamelessly. But the boy is stopped by Alfredo, who steps in front of him. With a serious look, the butler faces the young man, telling him to calm down. He says he'll fix his attitude, but Asta doesn't really care. Worried, Alfredo asks if something is wrong, but he replies that it's nothing. Thinking the timing was perfect, he says they'll see each other later. Turning his back, the young rival walks away down the hallway of the huge mansion. Calling for the head butler, Asta approaches him with a direct request. He then asks if he can meet with the lady of the house now. The very next day, Asta goes to the office for his meeting. Welcoming him, she greets him while continuing to write her documents. Getting straight to the point, she asks if he has made a decision about the academy. Confirming that he has, he prepares to give his final answer to the lady. With a confident smile, he announces that he will enroll in the academy. His quick and direct answer catches her completely by surprise. Surprised by his speed, she informs him they will begin preparations right away, telling him to make himself comfortable. She dismisses him for now. After he leaves, she remains seated watching the office door. Just then, Alfredo appears at the door, carefully peeking into the room. Asking about the boy, he hears that the proposal was thankfully accepted. All excited, Alfredo celebrates, shouting that Asta has the passion he was hoping for. She simply watches the butler's exaggerated reaction with an indifferent gaze. Pointing out that the first semester is paid for, he then questions the next one. He explains that the tuition will be difficult for a bum like him to pay on his own. Then when Asta is desperate, a helping hand will appear to aid him. His grand plan is to offer his own sponsorship to the young boy. She then interrupts him, saying he's being too loud and dramatic. After he leaves, she remains seated in silence, just observing the room. His happiness comes from having his offers rejected many times before. Even so, the academy proposal still seems like a very flawed plan. The question remains why Alfredo is so confident about this whole situation. The reason is that he was tricked in the same way by the previous head butler. Watching him leave, she realizes the butler is actually a pitiful soul. Outside, Asta walks down the stairs, strolling peacefully through the garden. Looking up at the sky, he stops for a moment and whistles a tune. Looking at the mage's hall, he remembers his rival was there earlier. Entering the place, he walks through a narrow and somewhat dark hallway. Then a hooded figure asks what brings him there, but Asta doesn't know the person's name. Not knowing the name, he tries to describe the person he's looking for. Saying he was expecting him, the hooded man asks him to follow. Following him down the hall, he watches the man guiding him with a candle. Pointing to a door, he tells Asta to enter that room, but he also warns him to watch his head when opening the door. Not understanding the warning, he opens the door very slowly. Suddenly, a flurry of papers flies towards him, hitting his face. Coughing a little, he hears a voice ask if he has Asta. Approaching him, the man says it's a pleasure to finally meet him, introducing himself as Wonji. He asks if Asta came to see his younger brother. Shocked, Asta realizes that Punk was his younger brother. In a memory, Asta watches the night from a balcony deep in thought. He recalls what it felt like to infiltrate magic academies. The mages who studied there all shared one very distinct trait. This trait was typical of the so-called pen holders who were always overworked. First, their hair would get all messy from how much they pulled on it. Thinking about it, he divided the whole situation into a few different stages. In the first stage, they'd wear hoods to hide their massive hair loss. By stage 2, they would just give up and reveal the whole situation. Then in stage 3, they would completely shave their heads as a disguise. In the final stage, they'd try to create a spell to make their hair grow back. Back in the present, Wonji starts by saying he wants to apologize first. Asta feels a bit awkward, unsure how to react to the situation. He then realizes that Wonji is incredible and also seems quite young. So Asta asks if he works at an academy, and Wonji confirms he's the vice director. Taking a sip of his drink, Asta concludes he must have the skills to match. Wonji faces him with a very subtle smile on his calm face. He then comments that young Master Asta is quite unusual and different. Letting out an awkward laugh, Asta just listens to the vice director's praise. He then takes a sip of tea, continuing his conversation with the young man. Congratulating Asta, he mentions the offered enrollment at Xenian Academy. Wonji says it's a great opportunity and that he graduated from there as well. Apologizing, he says he's just happy and suggests they get to the point. Asta then says that before that, he'd like to confirm just one thing. Wonji asks if Asta would risk his own life for a close friend. Hearing the question, Asta remains silent for a moment without answering. Explaining it's for the family's reputation, he holds a book in his hand. He then offers the book, saying he would give it to him if he accepted the risk. That book is revealed to be the family's secret, a treatise on healing. Changing scenes, Mrs. Gamo is tending to the flowers in her beautiful garden. Focused on her work, she continues to care for the flowers in the mansion's garden. With a pair of shears, she carefully cuts the flowers in her lovely garden. Letting out a sigh, she turns and calmly observes the area. Having settled Damien's departure for the academy, a weight is lifted from her mind. She thinks that Asta is a truly great friend to her son, Damien. Even though Alfredo says he's an idiot, she knows they're all like that. With a smile, she remembers what she liked most about the young Asta. Even after learning about Damien, his attitude didn't change one bit. But that's precisely why he deserves to be by Damien's side. His personality makes him free bird that belongs nowhere. There are many ways to keep a person close. She just has to choose one. For Damien's sake, she can't let a talent like him get away. Back in the room, Asta thinks about the offer of the family book. Unable to trust him, he wonders if this isn't some kind of trap. He notices that Wonji's eyes are transparent and very bright. Because of this, he simply can't read his true intentions. Analyzing the vice director, he thinks that his eyes reflect no emotion. To him, Wonji wears a mask so perfect that he doesn't even know himself. Wonji tells him not to rush, but Asta says he'll answer now. He then says he hates the feeling and wants to settle the matter quickly. Crossing his legs, Asta tells him to ask what he really wants. Making it clear, he says that if it's possible, he'll do it. If not, he won't. At this, Wonji warns that just by listening, his life will be in danger. With a defiant look, Asuka tells him to just kill him since you only live once. But in his thoughts, he recalls that for him, this would be his second life. Suddenly, a strong pressure begins to spread throughout the room. Wonji then releases a powerful energy enveloping his surroundings. With his finger, he lets a drop of his own blood fall into the cup. Maintaining the pressure, he continues to test young Asta's courage. In response, Asta releases his own energy, unfazed by the challenge. Seeing that reaction, Wonji smiles, seemingly impressed with the young boy. He says he can't stand it any longer and declares that Asta has passed the test of courage. He then explains that he needed someone trustworthy who wasn't part of the family. That explanation almost makes Asta react, but he manages to contain himself in time. Being honest, Wonji admits he didn't have high expectations for the boy. He thought Asta was just another nobody, but fate surprised him. Ignoring formalities, he tells Asta to choose how he wants to be addressed. He says the fight was a good excuse for the older brother to intervene. Asta questions the likelihood and the reason for a vice director to get involved in this. Making a proposal, he reveals it was difficult for him to take the initiative. Covering his eyes, he prepares to reveal his great and dangerous secret. He then reveals that he is under the constant surveillance of the Devilon family. Hearing the name, Asta wonders why this would be happening to him. Being frank, he decides to tell him everything since Asta doesn't mind dying. Telling the truth, he reveals that he is researching the Devilon family's magic, telling him to hold on. He explains that he obtained their secret magic by chance. Questioning the situation, he wonders how this guy is still alive. Then Wonji explains that if the research were only that, they would have already killed him. Admitting his intention, he says that at first he only wanted to destroy the magic. He then reveals that the magic is the root of the family's secret arts. With a smile, he says he can't stop, asking if Asta understands. Faced with such madness, Asta is left completely shocked and speechless. Wonji says he just couldn't control himself, asking for Asta's understanding. Processing all the information, Asta remains silent for a brief moment. As the conversation continues, the scene's focus shifts to the teacup. In a flashback, Wonji appears, conjuring a complex magic circle with a smile. Showing his power, an ancient mage unleashes a massive amount of energy. Inside the circle, the mage continues to channel power into the spell. Back in the present, Wonji calls out to Asta, who stares at him seriously. Sitting at the table, he asks Asta why he sought him out. Revealing a secret, Wonji admits he didn't report his research to the family. Asta then suggests that a secretary would be the most suspicious person of all. Sipping his tea, Wonji denies the theory, saying that's probably not it. He then explains that the moment he noticed the tracking, he figured out the formula. With a slight smile, Asta asks why he doesn't just join Declan. Wonji replies that there are personal reasons for not making that decision. Raising a hand, he says he has a secret job for Asta. He explains that the research is a joint effort, but his part isn't progressing. Promising a good reward, Wonji hands some papers to the boy. He then asks Asta to take the thesis to a professor at the academy. With his arms crossed, Asta just listens intently to the proposal without saying a word. Showing a slight smile, he prepares to make his counter-offer. Looking at Wonji, Asta says they're going to do things his way. With a confident look, he states that he wants the spell and the magic circle. Wonji calls him shameless, but Asta says it's take it or leave it. After a moment of thought, Wonji agrees to hand over the new circle when it's complete. However, he adds that he also has a condition to seal the deal. He explains that he'll need Asta's help until the research is finished. Agreeing to the term, Asta takes the paper and says he can't read. He then holds the document out towards Wonji as a taunt. Saying it was a joke, he calls Wonji stiff and humorless. After putting the thesis away, he asks if this professor is trustworthy. Laughing, Wonji says that he and his friend were always competing for first place. Listening with suspicion, Asta processes the story told by the nobleman. Realizing the situation, he notes that there's another lunatic just like him at the academy. Changing scenes, night falls over the family's enormous mansion. From inside a bag, several books and a sealed letter emerge. He then wonders why Wonji packed so many things in there. Among the books, he notices a letter with a red seal. Grabbing a letter opener, he prepares to read the message intended for him. Seeing the salutation, Asta maintains his serious expression, completely unimpressed. Inside the letter, Wonji explains that he has set aside essential magical texts for him. Finishing the letter, he reflects on the gift he just received. Next, he picks up the first book from the pile to take a look. Observing the organization, he recognizes the genius of the study plan that was put together. With a satisfied smile, he completely approves of his friend's initiative. Placing the letter opener on the table, he prepares to begin his studies. Sitting at the desk, he begins to organize the books Wonji sent him. He counts the total number of volumes and decides to discuss a matter with Damien. Thinking of his friend, he considers the gift a privilege of friendship. With a slight smile, he realizes it was more than just books. That study list was in a category of its own, capable of building a foundation. Understanding its potential, he says he won't just store the books in the tower. This would become the tower's identity, a place for those who seek knowledge. Looking at the night sky, he reflects that this was an unexpected game. Changing scenes, Wonji watches the moon through the window and thinks about his plan. With a smile, he admits that Asta is becoming an interesting guy. He then remembers a specific moment between them in the past. In a flashback, Asta tells him to just kill him because you only live once. Wonji recalls that it was just a test, but Asta truly challenged him. He remembers the boy's eyes, which treated death as if it were nothing. Finishing the memory, he realizes that Asta is different from the others. Smiling, Wonji realizes he has finally found a peer who is on his level. Even so, he still wonders if Asta really can't read. Dismissing the possibility, he concludes there's no way that could be true. The next morning, a new day begins at the family's grand mansion. Asta finishes getting dressed, adjusting the sleeve of his new shirt. With his bag packed, he waits by the bedroom door. Just then, Lancey appears, telling him it's almost time to leave. Without a word, he picks up his bag to finally leave the place. Along the way, she informs him that he is exempt from the academy's exam. Looking back, she gives a slight smile as she guides him down the hall. Lancey comments that he looks like a real student, complimenting his appearance. Thanking her for the compliment, he hears her say that they can go now. Walking down the hall, he reflects on the privilege of being exempt from the test. Suddenly, a cheerful voice calls him friend, interrupting his thoughts. Looking to the side, he sees Damien telling him to hurry up. After saying goodbye to Damien, Lady Gamo turns to speak with Asta. With a smile, she says she hopes he achieves the results he desires. He then thanks her for her words with a look full of confidence. Climbing into the carriage, he prepares for the new journey to the academy. At Xenian Academy, he knows that countless powerful patrons await him. Leaving the mansion, the carriage takes the two of them towards their new destination. On their way, he watches the landscape with a smile full of anticipation. Down the dusty road, the carriage continues its long journey to the academy. As they pass through the city, they draw ever closer to their destination. Inside the vehicle, Asta places his hands on one of Wonji's books. Analyzing its contents, he realizes that Wonji was a truly exceptional mage. He then begins to compare the fundamentals of magic to water. For some people, magic can be like the water of life, but for others, it becomes a completely disastrous and fatal flood. Reflecting on, he understands that it's all a matter of perspective. After studying, he realizes Wonji's curriculum is based on this very idea. Just then, Damien excitedly calls out to him, telling him to look outside. With a smile, the boy shouts that they've finally reached their destination. Arriving at the academy, the carriage stops in front of the enormous main gate. From inside the vehicle, Asta silently observes the place for the first time. Lancey then informs them that the carriage service ends at that point. Saying this is where they part ways, she wishes him well in his studies. Pointing to the academy entrance, Damien walks excitedly beside Asta. Grabbing his arm, Damien shouts that they need to hurry. He then explains that Lancey warned them about the lack of seats for the ceremony. Seeing Asta's confusion, Damien starts laughing uncontrollably at the situation. Asta then realizes it was just trick to get Damien to move quickly. Deciding to let it go, he starts running with Damien down the academy street. The scene changes, and they finally arrive at the auditorium where the entrance ceremony will be held. Inside, several other students were chatting while waiting for the event to begin. From above, you can see that the huge hall was already almost full. Impressed, Damien comments on how many people are there for the event. He then says that Lancey was right, but Asta doesn't seem to agree. Ignoring his friend, Asta takes a piece of paper from his coat pocket. He then checks the information, looking for their seat numbers. Desperately, Damien asks if they can sit down, but Asta tells him to wait a moment. Seeing his excitement, he wonders why Damien is so worked up about everything. Suddenly, Damien ends up on the floor after bumping into someone. Looking up, the boy freezes at the sight of the figure before him. In front of him, an older man glares down with a serious expression. With an annoyed look, he demands to know what just happened. Asta then approaches and asks if Damien is okay helping him up. Apologizing, Damien says he wasn't paying attention to where he was going. But as they try to leave, the man orders them to stop immediately. Pointing to his own clothes, he asks what Damien got on him. At this, Asta turns to look at the man's reaction to the stain. Damien then drops to the floor saying he'll clean the mess. Even so, the man remains furious at the boy's unexpected action. Losing his patience, he calls him an idiot and moves in to strike. After attacking, the man glares at the scene, his eyes filled with rage. But the attack is blocked by Asta's hand, which holds him firm. Gripping the man's fist, Asta warns him that it's better to stop right there. Annoyed, the man demands to know who the hell Asta is to interfere. With a smile, he replies that he's just Damien's friend. Letting out a laugh, the man acknowledges that he's a good friend. He then warns Asta that he'll regret making this choice. Adjusting his suit, Asta asks if he'd rather settle things with their fists. The commotion ends up drawing the attention of the other students present. Some of them try to understand what's happening and who is involved. Watching the scene, they start discussing who will win the fight. Suddenly, one of the students yells at the others for just standing around. He then says they should stop the fight before it gets worse. Pointing around, he asks how they can possibly fight with so many people in the way. The surrounding students realize the gray-haired boy is a mage. Raising their hands, they create a magic barrier around the three brawlers. With the barrier formed, they finally have space to fight without interruptions. The audience then starts placing their bets on who will win the fight. With his arms crossed, Asta takes in the scene surrounded by the crowd of students. Showing a slight smile, he seems completely confident about what's to come. Cracking his knuckles, Exter introduces himself as the second son of House Dolampi. In a fighting stance, he then asks for Asta's name. Straightening his tie, Asta replies that he's just a guy passing through. Ignoring the answer, Exter says he'll let him have the first shot. Turning his head to the side, Asta seems to accept his opponent's challenge. With a smirk, he prepares to finally begin the confrontation. Tugging his own tie, he taunts Exter asking if he's scared. Completely enraged, Exter's face twists into an expression of pure anger. Letting his things drop, he charges at Asta with everything he's got. The two then face off, preparing for the first punch in the middle of the hall. With a powerful blow, Exter strikes directly at Asta's face. In the middle of the exchange, he realizes something else is happening. Just then, Asta warns him that he's not alone because it's 2 against 1. Hit square on, Exter's face takes an unexpected blow. With a well-aimed punch, Asta hits his opponent with all his might. Thrown back, Exter stumbles from the force of the blow. Surprised, he wonders how a punch can be so heavy. In a fighting stance, Asta faces his opponent with an intimidating posture. Then, Exter notices a circle forming and questions if it's magic. From a distance, Damien points his hand and casts a spell in his direction. With his hands together, Damien continues to cast the healing spell on the noble. Seeing this, Asta remarks on how a prestigious family truly shows its colors. Taking advantage of the distraction, he lands another clean hit on his opponent's chin. From the impact of the fight, the magical barrier around them begins to tremble. Trying to defend himself, Exter quickly blocks the punches coming his way. Landing another punch, Asta comments that he is indeed quite tough. Meanwhile, Damien continues to heal the opponent with a smile on his face. The combination of attacks and healing continues, with the noble taking a relentless beating. Staggering backward, Exter begins to show clear signs of extreme exhaustion. Facing his opponent, he wonders if what he's feeling is fear. Some students shout, asking what Exter is doing and telling him not to hold back. Continuing to shout, they call him the pride of the Dolampi family. Shouting words of support, they urge him to end the fight quickly. Alone in the middle of the arena, Exter endures the pressure from the crowd's shouts. Gritting his teeth, Exter shows all his rage at the current situation. He then yells, questioning how a mere mage dares to do this to him. Without hesitation, Asta lands a direct punch to his opponent's face. Observing the result, he says his opponent's strike wasn't bad. Exter then yells, preparing a counterattack with his fist clenched. With all his might, he yells at Asta not to underestimate him again. Then he lunges forward, launching his body into a powerful spinning attack. Seeing the attack, the students cheer, saying that's what they expected from Exter. After the blow, he feels the impact of the punch landing squarely on target. Despite the punch, he realizes the impact felt light. As he's thrown, Asta uses the momentum to reposition himself in mid-air. Landing on the ground, Asta prepares to continue the fight against looking back. Exter seems confused by his opponent's fighting strategy. Screaming with rage, he can't believe he's getting beaten like this. Then the noble charges toward Asta once more with everything he's got. Watching his opponent, Asta maintains his usual calm and analytical expression. He then realizes he needs just one single blow to knock out the enemy. From a distance, Damien continues to relentlessly cast his healing magic on the noble. With a slight smile, Asta prepares to use a new technique. In the palm of his hand, he begins to gather a large amount of energy. Concentrating his power, he gets ready to use a technique from his past life. Next, he faces Exter, preparing to deliver the final blow of the fight. With his fist clenched, he lunges into the attack using his new technique. Revealing his fighting style, he moves in and strikes Exter with precision. Suddenly, the magical barrier around the fighters begins to unravel. Surprised, one of the mages who created the barrier wonders what that is. Struck by the blow, Exter is thrown far across the combat arena. From the impact of the fall, he ends up unconscious on the auditorium floor. Seeing the result, Asta hoists Exter's unconscious body onto his shoulders. The students in the audience watch the scene in shock, unable to believe what they've seen. Raising his arm, he celebrates his victory in front of everyone. Asta then turns and faces the crowd with a serious and confident gaze. The crowd goes wild, celebrating the new student's impressive victory. Looking back, he calls his friends to celebrate the outcome of the fight. With a smile, Damien celebrates, saying they finally won the fight. Asta then tells Damien to stop sucking his thumb from now on. From afar, other students watch the victory celebration in the middle of the auditorium. With a smirk, one of them comments on their fighting style. Another student agrees, saying their behavior is truly vulgar. Rushing through the crowd, the event organizers try to push past people. Furious, one of the instructors yells, asking who starts the fight on the first day. Then the instructor shouts, asking who started the fight in front of everyone. Keeping his cool, he watches the instructors try to control the chaos in the auditorium. Without a second thought, Damien turns himself in, shouting that it was them. Finally identifying the culprits, the instructor points directly at the pair of friends. With Exter knocked out on the floor, their guilt is more than proven. In another room, a man calls Damien and Asta for a talk. With a smile, Damien answers the call along with his friend Asta. Seated, the man asks if they confessed honestly to what they did. He then warns them that he'll be keeping an eye on them from now on. Swallowing hard, Asta just listens to the lecture without saying a word. After the talk, the two finally leave the room and head back to the courtyard. Opening the door, they re-enter the auditorium for the entrance ceremony. Back in their seats, they realize the ceremony hasn't started yet. The other students start whispering about the fight that happened there. Waving to the audience, Damien remarks that everyone is staring at them. Seeing their seats, Asta notices they're in a good spot in the auditorium. Damien celebrates, saying their friend saved good seats for them. On stage, the Academy's headmaster begins his opening speech. With an object in his hand, he speaks about the teachings of the first headmaster. The speech drags on, and Damien starts to get tired of standing. Seated, Asta watches Damien drooling in his sleep beside him during the speech. With a smirk, he's amused by the sight of his sleeping friend. Placing a hand on his chin, Asta wakes him up and tells him to stop drooling. At that moment, someone approaches and informs the headmaster that he needs to leave. One of the instructors whispers something in the headmaster's ear in the middle of the stage. Clearing his throat, the headmaster prepares to make an important announcement to everyone. He then apologizes, saying something urgent has come up and he has to leave. Ending his speech, he turns and quickly exits the stage. In his place, a woman with long hair takes the stage. With a shout, she gets the attention of all the students in the auditorium. The students seem surprised by the woman's sudden appearance on stage. Introducing herself as Jaira, she announces she'll be continuing the ceremony. She then calls the representative of the magic division to the stage. In the audience, the students are surprised to hear the Denai family name. The representative then goes on stage to take her freshman oath. Watching the girl on stage, Asta recognizes Dahlia of Denai immediately. He remembers that the Denai family is the second most renowned house of mages. He recalled that Dahlia was chosen as the future representative and was quite capable. Even though they didn't get along, he's happy to see her there. Jaira then calls for the representative of the martial arts division, a boy named Paul. Answering the call, a boy named Paul stands up from his seat. Looking at the boy, he notices that Paul doesn't seem to be from a noble house. After the oath, the two representatives conclude the first part of the ceremony. Next, Jaira begins to introduce the professors who will be teaching at the academy. At that moment, he notices Dahlia looking directly his way from the audience. For a moment, he gets the impression she's making eye contact. Deciding not to dwell on it, he looks away and focuses his attention back on the stage. Suddenly, he sees Professor Perrin trip and fall in the middle of the stage. As the other professors are introduced, he waits for someone who hasn't appeared yet. Finally, a new person arrives on stage and introduces himself to all the students. Introducing himself, Professor Perrin says he will be teaching the principles of Megalogy. Seeing the professor, Asta compares him to Wonji, but notes they are very different. Still, he decides not to judge as Wonji also wears a social mask. Jaira then announces the end of the entrance ceremony for all students. She then asks the students to follow the attendants to their dormitories. Asta then wakes up Damien, who asks if the ceremony is really over. Jokingly, Asta tells him he was caught sleeping and expelled from the academy. Not getting the joke, Damien turns to Asta with a confused expression. Then the boy starts screaming desperately, believing the story he was told. The sun begins to set on the academy's horizon. Walking down the hall, Asta reflects on how Damien screamed over a simple joke. Arriving at the door to his room, he wonders if this is the right place. He then enters the room located on the top floor of the dormitory. Seeing the place, he acknowledges that the academy is truly impressive. On the bed, he finds the basic supplies provided for all students. As he puts his things away in the room, he thinks about the academy's basic provisions. Just then, he hears the door open and turns to see who has arrived. Seeing the boy, he realizes his new roommate is Paul. Noticing the irritated expression, he decides he'll just try to live in peace. Paul then enters the room and states he wants to be left alone. He asks that they stay out of each other's business and not talk to each other. Coming closer, the boy demands an answer about their arrangement. Turning his head to the side, Asta just watches his new roommate. Noticing the silence, Paul asks why he isn't answering the question. Suddenly, he throws himself to the ground and tries to grab Asta's sword. Holding the sword, he asks what Asta is trying to do with it. Seeing the boy's stance, he admits his roommate isn't so bad. He then praises the way Paul holds the sword, noting his skill. Just then, Damien appears at the door and calls for him to hurry up and leave. With a slight smile, Asta replies that he's already on his way out of the room. He then says that Paul can do whatever he wants, but on one condition. With a provocative look, he warns him not to complain if he sings late. Leaving the room, he finds Damien waiting outside the dormitory. Damien then asks who his roommate is, but he says he doesn't know. Turning his face away, he says he didn't have time to find out. Excited, Damien invites him on a tour of the academy before it gets dark. Asta then realizes the academy is truly huge and easy to get lost in. Agreeing to the tour, he tells Damien it's not a bad idea. Suddenly, he closes his eyes, sensing something unusual in the academy's air. Atop the buildings, some mysterious figures watch everything intently from above. Looking closer, he recognizes them as assassins from the powerful Declan family. With a smile, he tells Damien to go on ahead and take a look. Walking through the courtyard, the two continue their tour of the enormous Xenian Academy. As they walk, Damien playfully messes with Asta's hair. They then reach another part of the campus with a new landscape. Seeing a lake, Damien shouts that he has nothing like it at home. Pointing to the water, he continues to show all his excitement to Asta. Watching the scene, Asta realizes this feels like a babysitting job for him. He then suggests that Damien ask to have a lake built just for him. With a smile, he explains that they just need to dig and fill it with water. Excited by the idea, Damien shouts that he'll ask for an even bigger one. Changing scenes, Lancey suddenly sneezes while working in the mansion. Looking at the sky, Damien asks what name he should give the lake. With a smile, Asta suggests the name Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Back at the mansion, Lancey turns around as if feeling something strange. Seeing a statue, Damien suggests building one just like it in his honor too. He then says the statue should be in the shape of a dragon. Suddenly, Lancey feels a chill and wonders what is happening. Finishing the tour, Damien asks if they can go back to the dormitory now. As he walks, Asta calculates the number of assassins he saw throughout the academy. He then realizes the center of their deployment is the second magic hall. Looking at the building, he confirms their target is Professor Perrin. He then remembers that Declan must know that Wonji has allies. Observing the campus, he notices a suspicious figure hidden among the trees. With a smile, he notes that the assassins have finally decided to approach the target. As night falls, he decides to find out how much they really know. Night finally arrives, bringing complete darkness to the entire academy. Leaping across the rooftops, one of the assassins moves swiftly through the academy. Then several other assassins follow the same path to their destination. Landing on the ground, one of them enters the building to meet his companions. Upon arriving, he finds another assassin already waiting for him inside. He then asks where the others are, and his companion says they went ahead. He explains that headquarters issued a new emergency order. The assassin then reveals that they have obtained some very important information. After hearing the plan, he understands the situation is quite serious. He then realizes their surveillance target must be Professor Perrin. Surprised, the other assassin grows worried about the difficulty of the new mission. He questions if they will have to deal with the professors alone without reinforcements. His companion then informs him that none of the stronger assassins will be coming to help. Despite the bad news, he says there is one more important piece of information. He reveals that the fire demon, Callahan, will be joining them on the mission. Shocked by the revelation, the other assassin is speechless for a moment. Thinking about the reinforcement, the assassin remembers Vice Leader Callahan, the Red Jewel. Knowing he is ruthless, the other assassin breaks into a cold sweat from fear. Desperate, he realizes the order is to risk their own lives on this mission. His companion then says the conflict might not happen openly. Agreeing with the plan, he prepares to finally leave the location with his partner. Leaping from the roof, they leave to quickly rejoin the rest of the group. Changing scenes, Asta observes the academy campus from a rooftop. Reflecting on the mission, he prepares for what will happen at midnight. He then remembers that Callahan was already at his peak in his past life. After the battle against the Blanders, he remained loyal to the Declan family. Showing his loyalty, he stayed with the house even when it was in ruins. He reached his prime as a war mage after the war against the family. He then became a legend known as Declan's Hell. Thinking about the mage, Asta decides he must capture him no matter what. He knows Callahan's magic is valuable and worth any risk. Looking at the campus, he realizes there is one last question remaining. He knows Wonji's thesis is with him, not the professor. Thinking about the mission, he's sure the thesis isn't fake. With this, he concludes that the thesis to be delivered is a forgery. Back in his room, he starts changing clothes for the mission. Grabbing his things from the closet, he prepares to leave in the dark of night. He then grabs his weapon and puts on a hood to disguise himself. Seeing his roommate sleeping, he leaves the room without a sound. Leaving the room, he sets off on his nightly mission through the academy. In bed, Paul opens his eyes and realizes his roommate has already left. Changing scenes, the light in Professor Perrin's office is still on. Sitting at his desk, he works peacefully through the night, unworried. Suddenly, closes his eyes and calls the Declan family rats. Alone in his office, he wonders about the meaning of this invasion. With a serious look, he realizes what is about to happen there. Across the room, a hooded figure watches the professor in silence. Perrin then notices the intruders are a group of hired mercenaries. Surprised, the professor recognizes one of the mercenaries calling out Paul's name. He then advises him to refine his disguise skills for next time. Next, he tosses a sealed envelope onto the desk for the mercenary. Looking at the boy, he says that is if he gets another chance. Stunned by the threat, Paul is speechless and just stares at the professor. Seeing the sender, he realizes the letter was sent by Wonji. Seeing the letter, he understands Wonji's plan to deliver the thesis. Even so, he knows Wonji wouldn't be caught so easily. Wondering what the trick is, he braces himself for what's to come. Suddenly, the office wall explodes from a huge fiery impact. Then, a man enters the room and greets Professor Perrin. Introducing himself as Callahan, he asks if the professor knows him from somewhere. Just then, Asta appears behind the professor, surprising the intruders with his presence. Callahan then remarks that they have another unexpected guest in the room. Perrin replies that he's never heard the name Callahan in his life. Losing patience, the professor tells Callahan to stop wasting time and get to the point. With a look of disgust, he says their smell is bothering him. Callahan then starts to laugh, saying he's never been treated that way before. Finding it all amusing, he says he'll keep things simple. Pointing at Asta, he says the hooded boy will die right there. Next, he points at the professor and prepares a fire attack. With a menacing look, he says he might let the professor live. In front of him, Asta conjures a protective circle to defend himself. The two attacks then collide, causing a huge explosion of energy. Falling to the ground, Paul feels the force of the enemy's fire attack. Lying there, he watches the fight between Asta and the powerful fire mage. Amidst the flames, Paul and Professor Perrin prepare to fight. Perrin then calls Paul over to give him new instructions for the battle. He warns that he will treat him as a mercenary and tells him to protect his own life. Agreeing to the order, Paul readies his sword to fight. Callahan then realizes the Academy's alarms haven't been triggered yet. Looking out the window, he sees the Academy is completely dark. At that moment, he realizes he can only count on the rookie mercenary. With a smile, he says the envelope came from the Blander family. Perrin then asks what he should do since he won't hand it over. With an insane look, Callahan invites him to play a little. In a massive explosion, Paul is thrown far away by the attack. With the room destroyed, Professor Perrin watches his student lying on the floor. Landing in the middle of the forest, Asta recovers from the impact of the previous explosion. In the midst of the fire, Callahan smiles, enjoying the power of his attack. Watching the scene from afar, one of the assassins is surprised by the situation. Suddenly, a powerful mage conjures a circle for a new spell. The spell then causes a massive energy explosion in the middle of the Academy. From a distance, Asta watches the large explosion happen on the Academy campus. Staring at the scene, he realizes things have finally gotten serious. Taking off his mask, he reveals his true identity for the night mission. Looking up at the sky, he says it's been a while since he's done this. With a new look, he introduces himself as the guild's #1 assassin. Watching the distant attack, he says it's time to begin. He then joins his hands, whispering the word moon to prepare himself. Looking up at the sky, he asks for permission to act as a vigilante today, but he admits with a smile that in truth, he's never been very just. Pushing off, he leaps from the roof toward his target. Cutting to a flashback, a huge tower explodes during an intense battle. Callahan laughs wildly, saying the mercenary is holding up pretty well. Exhausted, Asta remains standing amidst all the destruction. He then curses under his breath, realizing the situation is very complicated. Then he notices the talisman he received was a protective artifact. With a determined look, he shouts for the enemy to get out of his way. His entire body is then enveloped by a large amount of energy. A massive clash of powers erupts, destroying everything around them. Remembering the past, his companion says he can now trust him a little more. Back in the present, he wonders if that on the sword is a spell. He then asks if the other can keep blocking for much longer. Firmly, Asta assures them he can hold on for as long as they need. Laughing at the situation, Callahan says a mage and a guard are great. Taking a heavy hit, the ice barrier begins to crack. Callahan then launches a powerful spell toward his two opponents. Reacting quickly, Asta lunges forward and cuts through the spell with his sword. Meanwhile, his companion uses a magic shield to block another attack. In the air, several magic circles clash with great intensity. Realizing the situation, he seems to decide on a new course of action. With an evil smile, Callahan announces he's about to play his trump card. His companion then explains that a struggle for mana control is about to begin. Unleashing his energy, he asks how much the enemy can take from him. Callahan understands they're proposing a direct contest of strength. Accepting the challenge, he prepares himself and asks if they're going to duel. A huge explosion then erupts from the direct clash of their two powers. A massive sphere of energy forms above the tower, destroying everything around it. The blast violently throws both warriors far away. Asta is thrown upward while his partner falls to the ground, defeated. With no strength left, he curses for not being able to continue the fight. Seeing they are monsters, he notes there's no opening to attack. Lying in the rubble, he laments that they should have fought each other from the start. Back in the present, Asta and his group see a magical tornado in the distance. One of them warns that moving forward now would be suicide, asking them to wait. The group's leader asks how many targets are still left to face. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind hits the group unexpectedly. As he's hit, one of them realizes it's actually an ambush. Seeing the scene from afar, Asta yells to warn everyone about the trap. Landing hard on the ground, he gets into a fighting stance. Staring each other down, the two mages prepare for the next attack. With a focused gaze, Asta tells them to just watch what's about to happen. Announcing his arrival, he tells everyone to witness his entry into the battle. Confused, Callahan watches the new opponents arrive on the battlefield. Furious, he shouts, asking if they are messing with him. Moving at high speed, Asta quickly closes in on his main target. Arriving in front of him, Asta calls him by name while touching his shoulder. Facing the mage, Asta warns him that this place will be his grave. Unintimidated, Callahan yells back that he's the one who's going to die. Grabbing his arm, the mage stops him from completing his attack. He then fires a powerful energy blast at point-blank range. Pushed back, Callahan looks at the trench created by his own attack. Spitting blood, he realizes he's suffering from a severe mana reflux. From above, Asta just watches the fallen and weakened enemy on the ground. Badly injured, Callahan admits he can no longer continue the fight. Seeing their chance, the other vigilantes move in to invade the area. He then grabs a potion, saying he needs to suppress the reflux first. Drinking the potion, he wonders where an opponent like this came from. With a fixed stare, he seems to notice something about his new adversary. Asta then begins to manipulate the surrounding energy with great speed, then a powerful spell slices across the entire battlefield in seconds. Seeing this, Callahan admits his movements are efficient and his magic is excellent. He then asks himself in surprise if he's actually impressed by the enemy. Preparing several magic circles, he says he doesn't know who his opponent is, but he furiously shouts that he'll kill him anyway. A massive pillar of fire is then shot toward Asta. Standing still, Asta watches the huge explosion approach him without moving. On impact, his mask shatters, revealing part of his face. After the attack, a massive explosion covers the entire battlefield. Looking at the smoke, he wonders if he hit his target. He then says that what really matters is completing his mission. Seeing the others in the sky, he concludes that the masked man must be eliminated. Taking a deep breath, he plans to regroup and subdue Professor Perrin later. As he calms down, the empty potion vial falls to the ground. Suddenly, a voice asks, "Is that all?" Leaving him stunned. Emerging from the smoke, Asta says he knew he planned to eliminate everyone. Pointing in his direction, Asta prepares to cast a new spell. He warns that his enemy's ruthlessness will be his downfall. Then he fires a huge beam of energy at his opponent. Surprised, Callahan just comments on the incredible speed of the unexpected attack. With no time to react, he is hit head-on by the powerful spell. From the impact of the energy, part of his hair begins to burn. Then he slowly falls to the ground with a fatal head wound. After the battle, Asta simply turns and walks away from the scene. Taking a deep breath, he admits that, as expected, it really was the mighty Callahan. Remembering the fight, he notes that the mage's reflexes were still very sharp. He realizes that the enemy's final spell ended up being an advantage for him. Standing in front of the body, Asta just observes the final result of the combat. Crouching down, he starts to search the body, saying the item must be there. Finding the pouch, he says he knew it as mages always carry their grimoires. Putting the item away, he mentions he can remove the tracking spell later. Turning around, he tells the person who has arrived that they are very late. At that moment, Professor Perrin finally reveals himself in front of him. Perrin then explains that he was busy freezing some of the other invaders. Then he asks directly if Asta is also one of those rats he mentioned. Asta questions what it means to have just dealt with one of Declan's allies. Perrin replies that he doesn't need to deal with him since it was Wonji who sent him. Asta just stares at him in silence, processing the new information. Perrin then remembers the mysterious mercenary who approached him earlier. In a quick flashback, the assistant questions if the research was split in two. Asta then explains that Wonji must have planned everything to lure the enemies. He continues, saying the plan was to reinforce security and diminish their influence despite the intense fight. He finds it strange that the knights haven't arrived. Understanding the situation, Asta asks if he is the real messenger then. Handing over the papers, he confirms that this is the original thesis. Taking the document, Perrin begins to analyze the pages very carefully. With a serious look, he asks if Asta knows what's inside. Smiling wryly, Asta confirms that he obviously knows all of its contents. Understanding everything, Perrin just stares at him in silence for a brief moment. Then Asta says he doesn't mind fighting, but he doesn't want to lose an ally. Agreeing, Perrin says he has received the paper and would also prefer not to lose an ally. Turning to him, Perrin asks what he would like in return. Asta explains that Wenji trusts people whose desires align with his own. Bringing a hand to his chin, he seems to be thinking of a good reward. He then says he wants a book, leaving Professor Perrin a bit confused. Explaining his plan, he reveals that he's going to build a great tower of books. Perrin ends up agreeing, thinking the idea of writing a book sounds fun. As Asta prepares to leave, Perrin stops him and asks about a way to contact him. Joking about the situation, he says he doesn't usually get men's contact info. Then he shows a kind of bracelet which is actually a magical artifact. He explains that it's a communication crystal for them to talk to each other. Handing over the crystal, Asta notes that this way, Perrin won't have to look for him later. To this, Perrin awkwardly replies that he's not interested in men either. After Asta disappears, Perrin wonders why he felt so strange. A short time later, the Imperial Knights finally arrive at the scene of the attack. They quickly start securing the area, helping the injured in the process. To avoid further trouble, all the Academy students are evacuated from the area. This was the perfect cue for Asta to blend in with the other students. Seeing him, Damien asks where he was, and Asta says he went out to see something. Noticing he doesn't look well, Damien offers to help heal his wounds. Asta just stands there trying to understand what happened during the recent battle. Remembering the fight, he recalls how his power reacted when blocking the spell. At that moment, the mage was using a technique to avoid being hit by the magic. Not understanding, he just shakes his head at his insistent friend. Determined to investigate, he tells Damien he's not taking his pants off right there. To find answers, he decides to go to the Academy's largest library. As he was walking, someone approaches and asks if he's Asta. With a smile, the boy introduces himself as Chenbi, but Asta doesn't respond. Then, Chenbi comments with a smile that he seems to be a very good fighter. Realizing the risk, Asta stares at the boy seriously, considering what to do next. Introducing himself, Chenbi comments that Asta seems to be a good fighter. Surprised by the comment, Asta turns to him, not understanding the situation. Chenbi then explains that his fight at the entrance ceremony left impression. With a slight smile, he realizes he's become famous at the Academy. As Chenbi keeps talking, Asta just closes his eyes and gives a short nod. They then continue walking in silence through the Academy courtyard. Breaking the silence, Chenbi says he just wanted to stick with him for now. Looking to the side, Asta agrees that he pretty much understands the situation. Despite the rules, he knows the students still create their own barriers. Relieved by the response, Chenbi thanks him for not minding. Asta then agrees that being alone after the incident is a bit strange. Seeing the boy talk, he wonders if this is what a normal conversation is like. At that moment, he realizes that in this life he has only met very peculiar people so far. Remembering everyone, he notes that he had forgotten what normal was like. With everything settled, his new life at the Academy is about to begin. The next day, all the students return to the Academy courtyard. Already inside the classroom, they all wait for the first class to begin. Yawning sleepily, one of the students can barely stay awake. Sitting next to him, Damien complains about being sleepy while Asta just reads. Just then, Chenbi approaches and gives them a cheerful good morning. Sitting with them, he complains that they have to go to class after all that chaos. Looking at his classmate, Asta notes that he always seems to be in high spirits. Then Chenbi turns to him, asking if he's heard the news. He excitedly says that their class teacher will be the famous Jaira. Shocked, he asks how Asta doesn't know her and warns that she has arrived. Seeing the woman enter the room, Asta finally recognizes her from somewhere. Looking at her, he confirms that she was the teacher from the ceremony. Introducing herself as Jaira, she tells them they should focus on their studies now. She then explains that the class will begin with a mana measurement. Without hesitation, a student raises her hand and the teacher asks for her name. Introducing herself as Arjun, she gets permission to continue with answer. She then explains that although there's no single answer, mana quality is important. Explaining her logic, she says that superior quality would provide a great advantage. Hearing the answer, Asta recognizes it as the standard textbook version. With a click of her tongue, the teacher shows her clear dissatisfaction with the answer. Seeing her reaction, the student freezes in fear at the front of the class. Asking about her family, Jaira hears that she is from House Palame. With a look of contempt, the teacher says she figured as much. Completely terrified, the student doesn't know what to do or say. Looking at the rest of the class, she asks if anyone else wants to answer. Seeing that no one speaks up, she gets irritated by the silence in the room. Then she points to a student who introduces himself as idol to the teacher. Standing up, he says that the quantity of mana might be more important. From another perspective, he ponders that quantity could overcome quality. Completely confused, Professor Jera just stares at the ceiling, not understanding anything. When asked about his family, the student denies having any of importance. The professor ignores his answer and continues calling on other students to respond. Pointing to others, she asks the same question and ignores their answers. Suddenly, she points to Asta, asking for his response on the matter. Looking at the whole class, she says that she has heard all the answers. She explains that there was no right answer, which shocks the students. Asking them to think, she questions the kind of answers they gave. Looking at the female student, she asks if the answer was truly her own. She says that a mage must never lose their conviction for anything. Looking at the class, she asks how they are in that regard. Then she questions if they can call that a mage's mindset. In a serious tone, she warns that they need to become true mages. She concludes by saying that this was the message she wanted to convey to everyone. Hearing the lesson, Asta realizes that in the end, he was right all along. With the lesson over, she calls everyone for the mana measurement. Called by the teacher, Argan stands up frightened and quickly answers yes. At that, Jaira announces that she will be the class representative and will write down the results. Thanking her for the opportunity, the girl eagerly runs to the front of the classroom. Seeing her change, Asta realizes this is her training method. Chenbi then says he's jealous, but Asta doesn't understand of what. Afterwards, Jaira calls assistant professor to bring the measurement equipment. Pulling back the cloth, the assistant reveals the item for the mana measurement. Surprised, the students comment that it's a rare measurement device. Touching the object, she says that most of them have never seen one before. With a dark smile, she announces it's time to measure their mana. Everyone begins to whisper, clearly nervous about the upcoming test. Then, she warns that there might be a monster among them. In his seat, Damien just puts a finger to his lips as a signal. She explains that it's simple to use. Then she asks Argan to place her hand on the crystal and channel her mana. Placing her hand on the crystal, the girl starts to transfer her energy. Suddenly, Crystal reacts, creating a large magic circle around it. Surprised, she watches it transform in front of her. Next, a large number 4 appears floating above the crystal. The teacher explains that the central indicator shows the mana quality. She then announces that the student's mana quality is level 4. Excited, Argan thanks the teacher for the assessment with a big smile. Afterward, Jaira explains that they will now measure the mana quantity. The quantity scale reaches level 17 above the previous average. Praising the result, she says she can see how diligent the student has been. Argan is speechless, just watching the teacher with a slight blush. Seeing the result, Asta realizes she will be a very dedicated student. Saying she needs to leave, she asks the assistant to continue the measurements. As the measurements continue, the other students start talking among themselves. At that moment, Chenbi asks if Asta also wants to get his measurement. Suddenly, Damien falls from his chair, waking up startled by the noise. At the front, another student achieves an impressive level in the mana measurement. When asked her name, she replies, she is Farion of Denai. Looking at her, the assistant notices that she introduced herself formally. Seeing her manner, Asta senses the pretentiousness in her introduction. The assistant praises her scores as expected from a noble heiress. She then receives her result, which is a little below expectations. Yawning, Damien wakes up and asks what's happening in the room. Seeing his friend awake, Asta explains that it's the mana measurement. Excited, Damien stands up and says he wants to take part in the measurement too. Seeing his excitement, Asta just covers his face in embarrassment. As they get to the front, the students start whispering about Damien and Asta. Irritated, he wishes he wasn't just known for defeating someone. Recognizing Damien, the assistant invites him to do the mana measurement. He then asks if he just needs to let his mana flow into the object. With his hand on the crystal, he begins to release his mana without holding back. Everyone in the room is shocked, wondering if that's even possible. Looking at the result, a nearby student is completely frozen by what she sees. The result is stunning, showing a quality of 9 and a quantity of 57. Asta then realizes this is how ordinary people react to a genius. To them, the boy's power is like a huge insurmountable wall. Even knowing he was a genius, Asta is surprised by the result. He then understands how Damien got the nickname Monster of Blander. Remembering the past, he notes that this time, things will be different. With his plan, he will ensure that Damien transcends the limits of the ordinary. Praising the result, the assistant warns Damien not to let it get to his head. Walking back to Asta, Damien asks if he's had his mana measured yet. Seeing that he hasn't, Damien's face lights up with excitement. With a focused gaze, Asta prepares to take his own measurement. He knows everyone is curious to see how he compares to Damien. As he approaches the crystal, he thinks it's time for them all to see. He introduces himself as Asta, trying not to draw too much attention. With his hand ready, he slightly adjusts the properties of his mana. Then he releases an amount he deems appropriate for the measurement, but he realizes the device's base limit is too low. Seeing this, he releases a large amount of energy all at once. Suddenly, the crystal shows the number 10, maximum reading. The maximum result overloads the crystal, which begins to fail immediately. Confused, the other students stare at the error message on the crystal. Damien, however, shouts with excitement, finding the result incredible and impressive. Seeing the malfunction, the assistant says the device must have broken. Interrupting, Damien says it wasn't a device malfunction. With a smile, he says the result is correct, leaving everyone confused. Announcing that the device has been reset, the assistant asks him to try again. This time, the measurement shows a quality of 3 and a quantity of 15. Relieved, Asta realizes that balancing his power is harder than it looks. Suddenly, Damien yells at him, saying that this is all bullshit. Surprised, Asta asks where he learned a word like that. Imitating Asta's voice, Damien says he learned it from his friend. Annoyed by the situation, Asta realizes he can no longer speak freely. The next day, sunlight illuminates the Academy's courtyard. The Academy's first magic department continues with its normal activities. From her window, Professor Jaira watches the students moving about. She turns, looking at the site of the recent battle. Looking at the spot, she recalls the attack on Professor Perrin, but she isn't worried as she knows he was famous back in the day. At that moment, the assistant professor knocks on the door and announces himself. Entering, he hands over the records from the previous day's mana measurement. Analyzing the test results, she notes that Farians are disappointing. Looking at Damien's files, she realizes he will need special guidance, but something in the documents catches her eye, making her pause for a moment. It was the report on Asta, who had to retake the test due to an error. Reading the note, she discovers the error code was limit exceeded. Intrigued by the result, she decides she'll need to keep an eye on him. Meanwhile, Damien seems to be complaining that he's the one who should be watched. Creating a large dragon with his mana, he asks his friend what he thinks. Holding the energy, he asks Asta if it looks good enough. Asta simply replies that it should be enough for now. Sitting at the table, Asta asks him to make the form more dynamic and imposing. Chenbi is surprised, commenting on how easily he can change its shape. Meanwhile, Damien continues to play with the mana dragon effortlessly. Seeing his skill, Chenbi falls silent, just observing the vast difference. Asta notices his classmate's reaction but continues to watch the scene in silence. Then Damien turns and calls out to him, drawing his attention back. With a big smile, he says the day was fun and that he enjoyed the academy. Hearing this, Asta stands still, just looking at his friend without saying anything. With a slight smile, he replies that he's happy to hear that. Later, back in his room, Asta prepares to do something important. Holding the item he took, he begins to analyze what he got from the fight. He then realizes that Callahan's spatial bag is magically locked. Needing to hide, he explains that the whole process took about a month. He then reveals that he has already absorbed all of Blander's elixir. Taking advantage of the time, he also gained a lot of useful knowledge within the academy itself. Finally ready, he prepares to open the bag and see its contents. Then he starts to look through it, saying he'll see what's inside. Taking out a vial, he notices the first item is a potion. Next, he picks up a cloak but realizes he won't be able to use that item. Then he finds a bracelet that seems to be a defensive artifact. Testing the artifact's power, he concludes that it's not bad at all. But searching a little more, he finally finds what he was truly looking for. He then pulls out Declan's secret grimoire called the Red Flame. Remembering the magic, he knows it can burn through even force fields. Realizing its difficulty, he decides he will take his time to learn it. Suddenly, he remembers an event and wonders if it's today. Moving to the courtyard, the students gather for the performance evaluation. Excited, Damien shouts about the evaluation as he watches the crowd of students. Just then, Chenbi approaches him and asks if he's heard the news. He then explains that this time the challenge might be the canyon crossing. Asta remains silent, just listening to his classmate's explanation about the test. In his mind, he remembers that one of the tests is a corridor of trials. Then he recalls that the canyon crossing is a race to the finish line. Lastly, he remembers the simulator where they duel against opponents. But he concludes that it doesn't matter what the event is because he will pass. Meanwhile, Chenbi already starts planning his strategy for the challenge. Suddenly, a voice calls for silence, interrupting all the students' conversations. Everyone turns to see who is speaking, and a familiar figure appears. Introducing himself, Professor Perrin announces he will be supervising this year's evaluation. With a smile, Asta notices the professor's dark circles have gotten much worse. Perrin then begins his speech, explaining about that day's performance evaluation. Pausing, he prepares to announce which challenge has been chosen. Shocked, Chenbi realizes the test will be in the corridor of trials. At that, Damien calls him a liar, making him even more desperate. Seeing his plan has failed, Chenbi is paralyzed with despair and worry. Ignoring the confusion, the professor begins to explain the rules of the test. He then snaps his fingers, explaining that the test's objective is simple. The explanation continues, revealing they need to cross the labyrinth and reach the gate. One of students comments that the challenge seems too easy to complete, but Perrin says it would be no fun if it were just a simple race. Using his magic, he summons several golems for the students' challenge. Surprised, the students comment on the presence of golems in the performance test. Asa just watches, while Damien warns him to watch his mouth. Harun explains that the golems are slow but very tough for them to handle. Even so, the students are worried about fighting in a confined space. Seeing everyone's reaction, Asta realizes these mages lack composure. Remembering the past, he recalls how Paul showed his grit. Analyzing the class, he notices that some students show great potential. Among them, he sees that the first has the will and the second still fights on. In a serious tone, he says that's enough and cuts off his thoughts. He then positions himself in front of a large magic panel. Pointing to the map, he announces that the golems will act as guardians. Showing a bracelet, he announces that each student will receive one for the test. If the field is broken, he warns the student will be disqualified from the test. After hearing the rules, some students start whispering to each other, worried. Seeing their lack of motivation, he prepares to make a final suggestion. He then challenges the students, asking them to impress him during the test. Interested in the reward, Asta smiles, showing he accepts the professor's challenge. Before the test, he recalls his visit to the largest library on the continent. He remembers that the library is divided into 3 access levels. Inside, he couldn't find any trace of the volume he was looking for. To access the other levels, he would need a recommendation from 3 professors. Looking at the challenge gate, he realizes he needs that reward. With a smile, he says he memorized the entire cross-section diagram. Finishing his explanation, Harun announces they will have some time to prepare. Desperate, the students start asking the teaching assistants for various items. One of them yells, asking for a golem controller, but his request is denied. Seeing the chaos, Asta just raises his hand to get someone's attention. Suddenly, Damien calls him professor, leaving him completely stunned. Ignoring the confusion, Damien asks him for some vine seeds to use. Showing his magic, he says he can use plant magic anyway. With the seeds in hand, Damien thanks his friend and quickly walks away. Watching his friend walk away, Chenbi stands frozen, not understanding what just happened. Observing his friends, he wonders if they will seize the opportunity. Then the assistant announces that the starting positions are being assigned. As they walk, the 3 friends prepare for the start of the test. Looking at the map, Asta realizes his starting position is number 3. Excited, Damien says goodbye and tells him he'll see him inside. Chenbi wishes his friends good luck and gets ready for his own position. With the group, he remembers an old mission, finding it all strange. Suddenly, a student approaches, and if he is the famous Aster. Seeing the student's demeanor, Asta notices the arrogance in his expression. Introducing himself as D-Bay, the student says he has a proposal for him. With a smirk, he proposes that Asta buy the bracelets of the eliminated students. He then offers 30 gold coins for each bracelet. Surprised, Asta realizes that amount is a lot for a single bracelet. Dubé insists, saying it's a good offer for an orphan like him. Thinking about the proposal, Asta realizes he's not entirely wrong. He understands they just use what they have to get an advantage. But Asta questions his math, asking why the total is 90. Pointing to his targets, Asta says they are a group of 3. Including him, Asta explains that the group has 6 people in total. Then he asks why the students subtracted their lives from the final price. Not understanding the logic, Dubé and his group are stunned by the question. Laughing at the situation, Dubé wonders what kind of math that is. With a smile, Asta raises the price, bringing the total to 200. At that, Dubé realizes he's trying to profit from the opportunity. He then concludes that it's a waste of time negotiating with the boy. Remembering his plan, he notes that he needs a hunting dog. Seeing the negotiation has failed, Asta starts to walk away from the group. Annoyed, Dubé asks why he still has to pay for the people. With a smile, Asta says he must pay 120 coins. At that moment, the test begins, interrupting the negotiation between the 2 students. Furious, one of the students yells at Asta for his insolence. Pointing at him, the boy says that Tibet has barons as ancestors. As he continues to shout, Tibet simply calls him by his name. Suddenly, the boy stops yelling, looking back as if frightened by something. Facing his companion, Tibet tells him not to embarrass him any further. Agreeing to pay, he says that the lady's orders are the priority. Taking out the money, he realizes the deal with the lady is important, but then he says he'll have to raise the fee, surprising everyone. Agreeing to the new price, Tibet pays the coins to the boy. Tossing the coins, he warns that he will show them the value of that amount. In the sky, the sun shines, signaling the official start of the evaluation test. On the ground, a large magic circle forms, preparing the field's barrier. On their arms, the bracelets glow, indicating that the protection is activated. Shenbi then remembers that if the barrier is destroyed, the bracelet is left behind, and the user will be forcibly removed without being harmed in the process. Facing the situation, the female student prepares for the test about to begin. Meanwhile, Asta watches intently, waiting for the start of the proposed challenge. Meanwhile, Tibet's group continues to stare at Asta from a distance. In the control room, the assistants watch everything through the monitors. Drinking from his mug, Professor Perrin gives the order for the test to begin. Then the student groups are teleported to their starting points. With the teleportation complete, the assistants announce that the evaluation has officially begun. Looking at the monitors, he notices that Dahlia and Damien are at the same point. Suddenly, one of the monitors freezes, causing the assistants to panic. Interrupting the discussion, Perrin says he also checked the magic eye beforehand. Then the assistant tries to explain which starting point that monitor shows. Furious, Dubé realizes he is at the same starting point as Asta. The rules state that the barrier only activates against magical attacks. Asta then learns the bracelet still works even if the barrier is broken. Exter realizes he'll be teleported away unharmed. Drinking his coffee, Professor Perrin calmly announces the start of the test. Next, all the student groups are teleported to the arena. With the transfer complete, Asta and his group arrive at the test site. He turns to the others and tells them he has something very important to say. He then says that from now on, he's going to be a real pain. Wasting no time, Exter and his allies immediately begin preparing their spells. With a smug grin, Exter shouts that he wants to see how long your confidence will last. Multiple fireballs are launched at Asta, who stands waiting alone. Facing the attack, Asta focuses completely, determined not to be hit by the spell. He dodges with incredible speed, weaving through the flames untouched. A moment later, he appears behind them, knocking all 3 opponents to the ground. He withdraws his mana at the last second, avoiding the activation of the protective bracelet. By landing a punch to the face, he makes sure he won't be disqualified. He continues his assault, taking down every opponent one by one. Asta dodges a spell and counters with a direct hit on the opposing student. With one final punch, he takes down the last member of the group. Standing over the fallen, he remarks on how the young master defeated them all. Adjusting his tie, he demands 320 gold for their insolence. In the ensuing silence, the arena falls completely quiet. Struggling to his feet, Exter stammers, unable to form a complete sentence. Then he screams furiously, vowing that Asta will pay dearly for this. Asta casts a spell, hitting him and telling him to just disappear. Looking bracelet, he calculates the 10 gold deduction for the blows. Picking up the item, he claims that, in the end, he's the real victim. As he pockets the 6 bracelets, he finally wonders what to do next. Sitting on the steps, he thinks he needs more recommendations to get the reward. Hand on his chin, he begins to plan what kind of impression he should make. Looking down the corridor, he considers destroying the pillars to create a shortcut, but he quickly dismisses the idea. It would be suicide and make him too many enemies. Deciding to press on, he continues his path through the test arena alone. As he walks, he wonders how the other students are faring. The scene changes to a desperate group shouting that the situation is impossible. One desperate student screams they're all going to fail, begging to be let through. With a smirk, Damien says there's no way he's letting them pass. As they try to fight, the students complain that the golem's vines are blocking their spells. Running through the area, one of the guys trips on a vine. He hits the ground hard, unable to get up in time to escape. Another student is sent flying, hit squarely by the giant golem. The vine golem then prepares to attack the group once more. Stepping forward, Winster says all he wants is to pass. From his hiding spot, a student yells for Winster to stop attacking and hand over his bracelet. Seeing his chance, DeBay tells his companion to go after Winster and catch him. From his own hiding spot, Winster says he doesn't trust DeBay, who has betrayed people before. He then breaks into a run, preparing to escape the group chasing him. Running across the bridge, he reaffirms that his only goal is to pass the test. He keeps running at top speed, trying to put as much distance as possible between them. Winster stops suddenly, confused by what just happened. His bracelet suddenly activates, and he wonders what's wrong with it. He believes he was hit by a spell and assumes he's been disqualified. Sitting on the ground, he mutters that he'll be teleported out of the arena soon. But after a moment, he realizes nothing is happening. Just as he's wondering why he hasn't been teleported, he hears a voice. A voice greets the Academy scholars, its tone catching the student by surprise. As Asta listens in, the voice says some of them might already know who they are. Suddenly, a golem grabs Pakin, and the voice announces they have no demands. Elsewhere, Damien watches the scene unfold beside his stone golem. The voice then concludes, stating that the punishment will happen right here, right now. Then a voice warns that all students will die. There is no escape. In desperation, Wonji asks who's responsible, but Perrin tells him to stop. Wonji then orders the man to stop panicking and call the other professors. As the man runs off, Wengi yells for him to get Felina and the headmaster urgently. Professor Perrin slams his hand on the table, shattering it in a single blow. Staring straight ahead, Perrin says, "Those miserable worms. How dare they?" Back in the arena, the scene momentarily shows the ceiling of the test site. Suddenly, a massive stone golem begins to form. Running a hand through his hair, Asta groans about having to deal with more problems. Then, several more stone golems with glowing red eyes begin to appear. Surrounded by the monsters, Asta wonders what this ridiculous situation is. Attacking relentlessly, Asta lands a clean hit on one of the golems. After 10 minutes, he hears a voice echoing throughout the arena. That's when he notices the once slow golems are now incredibly agile. And to make matters worse, they know exactly where he is and are rushing toward him. Leaping to dodge, he realizes the control system has been completely tampered with. With a confident smirk, he reminds himself that he's an expert at dealing with problems. So he charges forward with his magic, determined to defeat whoever is behind the attack. Changing scenes, Chenbi wanders alone through the area, looking exhausted. Complaining about the situation, he says he should have quit the test much earlier. Suddenly, he freezes when he hears a noise, startled by the sound. Seeing a survivor in the hallway, he tries to make out who it is. Then he recognizes Asta, who stares back at him with a serious expression. Overjoyed, Chenbi raises his arm, about to call out Asta's name. But then he sees Asta running from a group of golems right behind him. As Asta runs past, he tells him to run and pulls him along. In a panic, Chenbi screams desperately as he flees from the golems with Asta. While running, Asta realizes Chenbi is about to get caught and decides to go with Plan B. So he stops and tells Chenbi to hand over his bracelet immediately. Explaining the situation, Asta says the golem's detection is extremely precise. Looking at the bracelet, Chenbi understands the item is connected to the control system. He then asks what will happen to Asta if he stays behind. Saying he's already the target, Asta reminds him that he has a family. Stunned, Chenbi freezes at the gravity of his friend's words. He lowers his head, reflecting on the great sacrifice Asta is about to make. In a memory, he recalls a promise he made to his older brother. With a tear on his face, he finally makes up his mind. Handing over the bracelet, he shouts for Asta to promise he'll survive this. Taking the item, Asta gives a small smile, confirming he got the message. As Chenbi runs away, Asta prepares to act as a decoy for the golems. In another flashback, Chenbi remembers all the sacrifices his family made. Remembering his family, he yells that he needs to repay all their efforts. In a memory, his mother smiles, calling his name with great pride. With a shocked look on his face, he remembers her calling him her proud son. Stopping in his tracks, he begins to question if he's someone to be proud of. Standing still, he calls himself indecisive, timid, and nothing special. Looking back, he sees the golems closing in faster and faster. At that moment, he yells that he won't abandon his pride just to survive anymore. Resolute, he declares he won't add any more regret to his heart. Preparing his magic, he says that even if he's pathetic, he won't surrender. With a determined cry, he swears he'll never give up on anything again. So he decides to use the best magic he knows to fight the golems. He remembers the spell his master taught him to awaken his talent. With all his might, he begs for the magic to work right now. Focusing all his energy, he completes the incantation for his strongest spell. With a magic circle, he activates the earth spear, ready to attack. In a memory, his master tells him to watch the spell very carefully. He describes it as a power that pierces through everything, as majestic as a spear. Using all his strength, Chenbi desperately screams Asta's name as he attacks. Startled by what's happening, Asta immediately turns to look back. Just then, a gigantic spear of earth forms and shoots forward at full speed. The magic explodes with a tremendous impact, forcefully destroying everything in its path. Seeing the destruction, Asta realizes the spell changes both its shape and quality. Sitting on the edge, he notes that changing two properties at once is incredibly difficult. From the strain, starts coughing up a lot of blood, feeling the weight of the magic. Asta then realizes there's no way Chenbi can maintain such a powerful spell. His face bruised, the young man begins to pass out, losing all his strength. Rushing to his side, Asta catches him before he hits the ground. He looks down at Chenbi's face, unconscious in his arms. Barely conscious, Chenbi explains that his master left him that powerful spell. Asta says the name isn't grand, but the spell certainly is. He says that a spell's greatness depends entirely on its user. With a faint smile, Chenbi manages to just say his friend Asta's name. Asta then gives him a potion, telling him it won't kill him. Seeing the potion's effect, Chenbi is amazed by his rapid recovery. Then, Asta begins to concentrate, sensing the flow of mana around them. By feeling the path of the energy, he's able to trace a route through the labyrinth. He then instructs Chenbi to go on ahead and find the other students. With a serious expression, Asta seems to have other plans for himself. That's when he senses a strange mana flow leading to the control room. Saying he has something to do, he decides to investigate the situation on his own. Running down the hall, Asta follows the trail of energy he sensed earlier. He tries to remember where he's felt that familiar presence before. Hiding, he realizes it's not Declan, but something that seems much worse. Suddenly, he stops in shock, finally recognizing the true nature of that energy. Before him, a demonic realm begins to manifest inside the arena. With a smirk, he says that demonic energy is impossible to forget. The entire area begins to be corrupted by the surrounding darkness. Then, demonic beasts emerge, recreating monsters that terrorized the continent centuries ago. With a furious look, he remembers the name of the one responsible for all this, Frizen. Elsewhere, Frizen appears with a completely maniacal smile on his face. Cutting to the control room, he celebrates the success of his dangerous plan. He shouts that the demonic realm has manifested and is now working perfectly. Showing his hand, he says it was all possible thanks to an ancient artifact. He explains that the item allowed him to take control of the room. Just then, a voice questions him, asking if he's sure about what he's doing. Friesen says that generating demonic energy fulfills his part of the contract. With disdain, the man says he doesn't care about the method used. For him, all that matters is that Xenon Academy is completely disgraced. Bowing, Friesen says that no one would dare oppose his orders. Annoyed, Friesen thinks he'll have to put up with the man until the contract is over. With a smile, he says the most important thing is that the wish has been granted. He then celebrates his success, saying the elders will give their full support. Suddenly, The man warns Friesen that a student is approaching their location. Friesen then excitedly says that the first test subject has finally arrived. With an evil grin, he asks if the man isn't curious to see. He explains that the person could go insane or die from the demonic contamination. But he says ancient texts reveal something different for those who have mana. According to the texts, the person would undergo a beastification, turning into a demonic monster. Looking at the screen, he wonders what the student will do now. Seeing the screen, Asta realizes he's surrounded on all sides with no way out. Deciding to move forward, he says this works perfectly for him. With a serious expression, he faces the path ahead. In the control room, Friesen reacts with surprise to what he sees on the monitor. Smiling at screen, Asta tells the villains to wait for him. His image remains on the screen, keeping the attention of the two men in the room. He finishes his sentence, making it clear he's coming for them personally. Then he calls Friesen by name, completely surprising the villain with the revelation. When asked if he knows the boy, the man gets an immediate denial from Friesen. Meanwhile, Friesen wonders how that student could possibly know his name. He's left completely shocked, unable to understand the unfolding situation. Showing the test bracelet, Asta reveals he has a plan in mind. Facing the demonic beasts, he prepares to launch his counterattack. Without hesitation, he starts running toward the monsters surrounding him. Sprinting forward, he advances without showing any fear of his enemies. Unleashing several mana attacks, he strikes the demonic beasts with precision. With the ability activated, the demonic beasts begin to react strangely. Then, all the beasts turn on each other, ready to attack. With a cold gaze, Asta orders them to kill each other until none are left. In despair, Friesen shouts, unable to believe what's happening to his creatures. He remembers the boy, realizing something very dangerous is approaching them. On the screen, he sees Asta moving at high speed, leaving everyone shocked. In a panic, Friesen desperately screams for someone to stop that boy. Seeing Asta break through the barrier, the man yells for them to hurry and stop him, but his speed is so great that no one can react in time. Bursting into the room, he attacks and takes down all the guards inside. Stopping in front of the two, Asta says it's been a long time. With a smile, he confirms they've finally met again after so long. Changing scenes, Chenbi meets up with Damien, who greets him back. With a smile, Damien says he was protecting his friends with his golems. Impressed, Chenbi looks at the Cerberus units, praising Damien's skill. Suddenly, Chenbi comes face to face with Dahlia, who stares at him seriously. Questioning the boy, she asks how he managed to get there alone. He then notices she's still wearing the test bracelet. He realizes they haven't thrown away their test bracelets. Desperately, he shouts for them to throw the bracelets away immediately. He then warns them that the golems are tracking their location through the bracelets, but Farion simply ignores the warning, saying it's all ridiculous. Turning to the boy, he asks why they should trust his warning. Argan then accuses him of trying to collect the other bracelets. Shocked by the accusation, Chenbi is left speechless before them all. In front of the group, Arjun accuses him of wanting to collect everyone's bracelets. Annoyed, Chenbi says the bracelets are the least of their worries since they're trackers. Farion then asks if he figured that out on his own, but Chenbi denies it and says it was Asta. With a mocking smile, Farion says that Asta obviously made up that story. He accuses Chenbi of being tricked and now trying to trick them too. The other students agree, mocking him for being influenced by the commoner. Shocked, Chenbi is paralyzed by their distrust and reaction. Furious, he tells them to stop talking about things they don't understand. In a flashback, he remembers the moment Asta sacrificed himself to save him. He then begins to tell them about the first time he met Asta and Damien. That day, he asked what Asta had, and he answered without hesitation. Then Damien says that Asta's answer was that he had a friend, which is why he trusts him. Throwing his bracelet on the ground, Damien states he doesn't need that useless item. With a smile, he calls for Chenbi to leave with him, leaving the boy completely surprised. Seeing this strange behavior, Chenbi is confused, not recognizing who that person is. Back in the control room, Asta faces Friesen and his masked companion. With a smile, he says he's already been to the demon realm to kill him. At this, Friesen yells that he doesn't know him and complains to the guard beside him, asking if he's sure. The guard hears Friesen confirm that he's never seen him before. Shrugging, the masked man finally turns to face young Asta. Holding his weapon, he warns that he has a contract and therefore has no choice. Preparing to attack, he warns that he must kill him without a trace. Just then, Asta recognizes the name Weimar, one of Declan's vassal houses. In a flashback, the banner of House Weimar appears, known for its wind magic. He understands that the family's rejected son is none other than that hunting dog. As a hunting dog, he acts on the front lines for his master. So Asta wonders why Weimar's dog would be with someone like Friesen. Turning his head, the masked man asks what he knows about them. Angrily, Asta shouts that he was the one who asked first this time. He demands to know why Weimar's hunting dog is with him. Questioning him, the masked man asks what he'll do with that information. Shouting in anger, Asta demands that he answer him immediately without beating around the bush. With his mask broken, the man says he's nothing but a lunatic. Annoyed, he tells Asta to stop repeating the same thing over and over. Without waiting for a reply, he lunges forward to attack Asta with his chain weapon. Asta dodges the attack and kicks the table in the center of the room. He uses the momentum to get even closer to his opponent. Surprised, he sees Asta shout again about Weimar's hunting dog. Using his magic, he tells the boy to stop his senseless obsession. With his magic, he summons 2 floating weapons to attack young Asta. He then hurls the weapons at high speed toward his opponent. Asta manages to dodge the attacks, narrowly escaping being hit by the weapons. Even while running, Asa keeps shouting, completely obsessed with the same question as before. Readying his weapon, the man prepares to counterattack with all his strength. Filled with hatred, he charges forward, vowing to tear that monster to pieces. With his weapons in hand, the man says there's no way Asta can dodge. Then he realizes the boy is completely frenzied by the situation. But Asta manages to dodge the attack, completely surprising the masked man. Grabbing the chains, he says he's raised dogs before and knows how to handle them. With that, Asta manages to trap his opponent with the very chains he was using. With a malicious grin, he explains that dogs get anxious with repetition. Annoyed, the man shouts that he's being treated like some common dog. Without looking away, Asta continues his provocation to irritate his opponent. Landing a punch, Asta says he is indeed Declan's dog. In despair, Friesen shouts at the man, asking what he's doing. Preparing his magic, he warns that he won't forgive him if he's defeated. With the collision of powers, a huge explosion erupts in the control room. The masked man is thrown far away, completely defeated by the blow. Turning to Friesen, Asta says he's still hiding behind others. Then he announces that the fight will now be just between the 2 of them. Holding an item, Friesen says Asta is getting way too full of himself. Then Asta picks up the weapon from the floor and prepares to attack the villain. With one strike, he hits the item in Friesen's hand dead on. Friesen's arm is destroyed, and he screams desperately in pain. Panicking, he begs Asta not to come any closer, trying to back away. Leaning on the orb, he tries to use the demon realm as a threat. He warns that if he's killed, Asta won't be able to stop the demon realm. Surprised, he sees Asta simply ask what the problem is with that. Then, he says he'll wait until the demon realm devours everyone. With a cold stare, Asta warns that Friesen will be the next to die. He finishes by telling him to laugh all he wants while he still can. Confused, Friesen wonders what kind of person the boy in front of him is. He realizes Asta doesn't care about the deaths of his friends in the demonic realm. He then wonders if the young man before him is even human. Trying to buy time, he says he can stop the realm, but Asta ignores him. In desperation, he asks why Asta doesn't care, completely misunderstanding the situation. Saying the method is simple, Asta snatches the artifact from Friesen's hand. Surprised, Friesen complains about the artifact, not realizing when Asta had taken it. Asta then asks if he thinks he's the only one who can use the artifact. Placing his hand on the orb, Asta says that all his memories are coming back. With that, he begins to deactivate the demonic realm using the control core. Shocked, Friesen can't believe the boy is doing this right in front of him. Asta says he could never forget the one who taught his master forbidden magic. He recalls that the young master gave up, but Friesen did not. Back then, Declan would have executed him, pinning countless crimes to his name. Asta finishes by saying he hunted him for refusing to turn him over to Declan. Continuing his story, he says he pursued him for a long time without realizing it. He prided himself on capturing anyone, but with Friesen he had failed. In his memories, there wasn't a single place he hadn't searched. After chasing him for so long, the final place he chose was the demonic realm. Inside, he says the energy and the beasts drove him completely mad. Giving up on everything, he left and found an informant waiting for him. With a dark smile, he reveals the news was of Frizen's death. Lying on the ground, Frizen breathes with difficulty, shocked by the story he just heard. Trying to save himself, he claims to be just an attendant, not understanding what's happening. Taking out a potion, Asta says he hadn't paid attention to the villain's wound. He then forces him to drink it, warning that he can't die just yet. Seeing the potion, Frizen believes he has found a chance to finally survive. Continuing the story, Asta recounts a day he saw a wyvern flying across the sky. In that memory, the creature seemed to fly freely without a care in the world. Looking at himself, he realized his revenge had become meaningless. Seeing his chance, Frizen tries to attack Asta with forbidden magic without hesitation, but Asta manages to touch the artifact's glove before the attack lands. He then lunges forward and strikes Frizen, who he had just found again that very day. Grabbing the villain, Asta says this was all because of that moment. He explains that he studied everything Frizen behind about the artifact and the realm. Using his magic, Asta reminds him of how he described the deaths of his companions. He then says that the only thing he has now is plenty of time. With a malicious smile, Asta promises he will recreate all the pain he suffered. Terrified, Frizen can only stare at his opponent's horrifying face. Outside, the arena corridor begins to tremble from the fight. The golems that stood guard start to deactivate and fall to the ground. With the creatures down, the path is finally clear for everyone. Just then, the ceiling collapses, opening a passage for the teachers. Desperate, Wengi orders everyone to find the students as quickly as possible. Seeing the situation, Jera prepares to enter, cursing the mess she found. Complaining about the lost time, the professor declares that no one is allowed to die in this place. Just then, one of the teachers calls out to her, and she immediately turns to listen. Another man then reports that the spells have been dissipated and the system restored. Holding the orb, she orders that the priority is to find all the students. The team of teachers then begins to search the arena's corridors. During the search, they find an injured student in need of immediate help. Soon after, Damien's group is found, protected by their enormous golems. Arriving on the scene, Felina finds all the other students gathered together and completely safe. Not understanding the scene, she wonders what exactly happened there. Despite the long attack, she notices there were no casualties. At that moment, Professor Perrin contacts her through the communication orb. Saying he's in the control room, he asks her to look at the screen. As soon as she sees the image, she is utterly shocked. On the screen, the two invaders appear brutally defeated on the floor of the room. Seeing all the destruction, she wonders who could have done such a thing. Suddenly, she seems to remember something important about the situation. In a memory, she sees the file of a very specific student at the academy. The file reveals that the boy was admitted through House Blander. She then realizes his power is far beyond a normal level. The instructor then says that the student must be monitored closely. Asta then rejoins the other students, being watched by one of the professors. Professor Felina realizes it's already too late to intervene. Suddenly, the academy's director arrives on the scene, greeting everyone. He explains that he came as fast as he could, but it was already over. With a smile, he thanks Felina, saying he did the right thing by trusting her. Looking at the screen, he asks if the boy was the one responsible for this scene. On a rainy night, he reflects on the inner demons every mage faces. This dangerous condition appears without warning and rarely ends well for anyone. Remembering his past life, he leaped between walls like a skilled mercenary. Back then, his fury was awakened by the loss of his former comrades. Sitting on the floor, he realizes those emotions planted a dangerous seed. Despite everything, this sense of imminent danger feels very familiar to him. Rising from the floor, he decides to confront this challenge once and for all. Now on his feet, he sees the tension as something welcome and necessary. After a week, he picks up the book, feeling the time has come. With the secret tome of Crimson Fire, he smiles confidently at the challenge. Flipping through the book, he prepares to learn his first elemental technique. With focused eyes, he reviews every detail to avoid making any mistakes. Leaving the book on the floor, he focuses to begin his practice. He closes his eyes knowing he needs more than just to circulate mana. To succeed, he needs to form a clear mental image in his mind. Focusing on the image of a single flame, he visualizes its pure power. This flame is born from mana and burns without needing any external fuel. With his hands, he finally manages to materialize his first fireball. Kneeling on the floor, he completes the first phase, the ignition of the flame. He realizes the destructive power of this new magic is twice the normal amount. Trying to compress the flame, he finds he can only do it once. He then realizes the technique's recoil is much stronger. Letting the flame flow, he decides that time will solve this problem. With this progress, he is one step closer to his mysterious goal. Now that he's mastered the technique, he needs a spell to use it. Changing the subject, he senses something strange approaching. He feels a very obvious presence coming down the hall toward him. Going to the door, he opens it to see who was outside. Stepping out into the rain, he comes face to face with a figure waiting for him. Wenji praises his perception as Asta understands Professor Felina's suspicion. Then the Academy's director appears, saying he's quite interesting. Asta asks if he is the director, but is corrected to call him the dean. With a serious look, the dean says that despite everything, there's a catch. Suddenly, he releases an overwhelming pressure toward the young student. Asta tenses up, breaking into a cold sweat under the immense pressure from the dean. Clenching his fist, he prepares not to yield to the strong intimidation. He plants his feet firmly on the ground, showing he'd rather break than bow. Then the dean asks if he isn't going to greet him, the highest authority. Resisting with all his might, he faces the dean with pure determination. With no other choice, he bows deeply and formally greets the dean. Praising his manners, the dean hears Asta shout an apology. Informing him that he's blocked the sound, the dean says he can scream all he wants. Asking what he's doing there, Asta hears that the dean came to ask some questions. At that, the dean releases his mana, asking if he can begin the interrogation. Under the pressure, Asta's leg gives way, forcing him to his knees. He then reveals that Professor Felina told him Asta was hiding something. At that, he prepares to ask the young student his big question. Under the intense pressure, he hears the dean ask what he's hiding. Gritting his teeth, he realizes that man is a true monster. But remembering an old enemy, he sees the dean is nothing in comparison. Analyzing the mana flow, he aligns his own energy to counterattack. When the flows synchronize, he extends his hand to break free. Using the indirect method, he finally manages to break the mana restriction. Free from the pressure, he understands the dean came because of the incident. Getting up, he takes responsibility, saying he took care of those rats. Faced with the confession, the dean is speechless for a brief moment. He continues, saying it's not a secret worth hiding. After confessing, he asks if the dean has any more questions. In response, the dean just stares at him with a very intense gaze. Under that gaze, he feels just like the time he faced a wyvern. Letting out a long sigh, the dean seems to relax his posture a bit. Seeing the dean sitting on the floor, Asta calls him an unpredictable lunatic. Praising the young man's gaze, the dean says he's ready to begin. Then he advises Asta to only answer what he can. Asking him to sit, the dean waits for Asta to obey the order. Now sitting in the rain, the two face each other in a tense silence. Noticing the shift in the atmosphere, Asta becomes much more tense about the situation. His presence changes completely, resembling that of a fearsome war mage. Then he prepares to finally start with his first big question. He asks if Asta happens to know about a wyvern that became a meal. Completely shocked, the dean just asks what he just heard. Telling him to continue, the dean calls him a rookie, but Asta corrects him. Pointing at the young man, he says that makes him his senior now. Confused by the logic, Asta retorts that they're not on a battlefield. Yielding to the pressure, he calls him senior, getting praised for his obedience. He prepares to continue the conversation, still very tense about everything. Calling him rookie, the dean says he has the eyes of a war mage. Then, angry about the intruders, he asks what kind of trash they were. Urging him to continue, the dean prepares for his next serious question. With a furious look, he asks what kind of trash the invaders were. He then asks what the dean intends to do with this information. He hears the dean say he will gather his old and powerful companions. Interrupting the conversation, he says the matter is actually about Declan. Hearing the new name, the dean just listens, waiting for more details. At this, the dean suggests that perhaps Asta is the mage from the story. Faced with the dean's realization, he just turns his face to the side. Revealing the truth, he says the invaders were both from the Vimar faction. He names Friesen and the Hound, and the dean asks for proof. Sarcastically, he asks if the dean wants the proof chewed up for him. Shaking his head, he refuses to answer how he found out everything. Seeing the young man's refusal, the dean observes in silence for a moment. Without insisting on an answer, he prepares to ask his next big question. Resting his hand on his knee, Asta hears the dean say that he understood everything. Feeling he has said all he could, he awaits the dean's reaction. He realizes the dean is genuinely furious about the whole situation. Changing his tone, the dean asks if he knows a mage who became a goblin's meal. With a forced smile, he tells the dean to stop smiling at him. Closing his eyes for a moment, he is clearly irritated with the old man. Looking up, the dean says that he wants to build a library. He continues, promising to fill a wall with books if the top floor remains empty. Pleased with the proposal, he thanks him, understanding the importance of the connections there. But the dean warns that access to the library will cost a favor. He then tells the rookie that it only takes one eye to see the world. Smiling out of pure nervousness, he says he's eager to know what the favor is. Showing an artifact, the dean says the favor can wait for now. He explains that the item is dangerous, but it will help in the tower's construction. Its main function is spatial rupture, which can even block teleportation circles. This ability would be perfect for defense, but there's a big problem with it. He tells the senior that he doesn't understand much about current magical technology. At this, the dean tells him to look for Professor Felina, promising a recommendation. He also warns that it will be difficult to get the professor to accept him easily. Extending his hand, the dean seals the deal with the young student. The scene changes to the next day as a sunny and calm morning arrives at the academy. On that day, the students' routine was proceeding as usual. Inside a cafe, Asta was reading quietly when he heard someone approaching. A cheerful voice calls him friend, making him look to the side. He comes face to face with Chenbi and Damien, who seem very happy. Sitting down with Chenbi, Asta asks why he suddenly gained so much weight. Another student passes by and invites Chenbi to practice magic later. Damien also takes the opportunity to thank Chenbi for his help during the recent incident. Chenbi explains that the tip about the bracelet helped all of their families. Filled with gratitude, he turns and thanks Asta directly for everything. With his hand on the book, Asta says he doesn't think he should be thanked. He then says that Chenbi was the one who convinced everyone on his own. Completing his thought, he states that all that change was Chenbi's doing. Curious, Chenbi asks what Damien did during that whole incident in the dungeon. At this, a student explains that Damien controlled a golem using plant magic. Sitting at the table, Chenbi says they have a lot to talk about. Just as they were about to start, Chenbi is startled by something behind Asta. It was Professor Felina who asks Asta for a moment of his attention. Without a word, he just turns to face the professor. The scene shifts to the professor's office, where Asta is now waiting for her. Standing before him, she asks if he knows why he was summoned. Acknowledging his answer, she simply says he is completely correct. After sitting down, she informs him that she has already heard the whole story. Questioning his identity, she asks if he is a descendant of a war mage. Calling them all trash, she says that anyone who associates with Declan is the same. That story aligned with what the dean had planned for him. Recalling the plan, the dean explains Asta's new cover identity to him. His story would be that of an apprentice whose master held a grudge against Declan. Despite her suspicions, she says she'll let it slide because of the dean. He then interrupts her, saying there's something else before that. At his words, the professor becomes visibly flustered and surprised. Running a hand through her hair, she says she'll cover everything up for now. Seeing her stammering nonstop, he calls her name, trying to understand the situation. He then says he's sorry, but the age difference is a big problem. Consumed by rage, she glares at Asta with a look of pure fury. She then unleashes a wave of pressure, making Asta's hair fly back. After calming down, she composes herself to continue their serious conversation. She says she's not good with these things, but she has to say what's necessary. Thanking him, she touches her face, visibly embarrassed by the situation. She explains that thanks to him, all the students in the hallway were saved. Processing the information, he just looks down, listening intently to the professor. He then calls out to the professor, who tells him to just spit it out. Revealing his goal, he explains that he wants to create a library for everyone, agreeing with the idea. She says it's not a bad plan to have. With that, she turns away, saying they'll now get to the main point. She explains that researching the ancient artifact will take a lot of time. She mentions the artifact has risks, but it can be destroyed if necessary. Interrupting the professor, he says the real problem is something else entirely. She then finishes his thought saying the problem is those who will come after the gauntlet. He explains that the forbidden magic cabal, Salvatium, is after the gauntlet. Asta gets the name wrong, and the professor corrects him with a threat. She explains that they operate separately but share the same main objective. With a serious look, she reveals that they want to recreate the demon realm. Now that Frizen is dead, she warns that they will come after Asta. Sitting in the chair, he understands that the target is the artifact he possesses. She warns him, saying they are persistent and that he could die. Turning his face away, he just repeats the phrase about the possibility of dying. Giving a slight smile, he says there's nothing to worry about. He then says he'll just chew up and kill everyone who comes. Surprised by his answer, she laughs, questioning the punk's confident look. He then asks her to research the artifact for him in his place. Placing the gauntlet on the table, he formalizes his big request for help. Praising his ambitions, she takes the item and agrees to investigate it for him. Suddenly, the door bursts open and a student runs in, yelling for the professor. Desperate, Instructor Runfit shouts that something is happening at the academy right now. He announces that the head of House Declan has just arrived on the premises. At that, orders are given to reinforce the defenses as the carriage approaches. Along the path, the carriage advances toward the academy's main entrance. Waiting outside, the director and the professors await his arrival. In the carriage, Farron von Declan commands the horses with the reins in his hands. Facing the newcomer, the director recognizes him as the head of House Declan. A genius, Farron became the head of the family at 30 years old. Despite the rumors, the director knows one thing about him is certain. Arrogantly, he refuses to step on the academy's hallowed ground. He then humiliates the director, breaking an ancient tradition of that important place. With a hand on his chin, Farron seems to be pondering the whole situation. He then asks the director if it isn't time to begin. Seeing the confusion, he says he heard about the invasion of the testing hall. Giving a smirk, the director realizes the head of House Declan's gambit. Furious, the director asks if Farron came all this way just to spew nonsense. The professors are shocked as few knew of Declan's connection to the attack. In front of everyone, Farron boasts, asking what the intention behind it is. He smiles sinisterly, saying it can't be what he's thinking. Using dark magic, he says he came to help and personally captured the vermin. From inside the carriage, he throws out several body parts. Surrounded by the magic, the director watches the terrible scene, unable to react. Farron reveals that Weimar was the leader and he has already eliminated them all. From the top of the building, Asta watches the scene confirming that Farron killed Weimar. He had expected this as Farron was always a cruel person. Remembering the past, he recalls how merciless Farron was to everyone. Despite everything, he realizes the timing of Farron's arrival was too perfect. Asta begins to question whether it was luck or a very well-calculated plan. Watching Farron from afar, he sees him as a more understandable figure now. With a smile, he says that Farron has become a giant mountain to be climbed. Extending his hand toward him, Asta prepares for his next great challenge. He says that in this life, he might finally be able to surpass the powerful leader of House Declan. With a clenched fist, he stares down Farron, ready for the great battle to come. A few days later, the academy was buzzing with recent events. After his gruesome display, Farron took things even a step further. He announced he would be sending a direct descendant to the academy as a student. In response, the Imperial side immediately announced a third round of academy admissions, but that was a story for a little later in the future. Right then, everyone was excited because it was time for the grand festival. As a celebration of victory, the Pisanaki Festival was a very important event. People were saying the academy used the hallway incident as an excuse. Because of this, the academy even allowed drinking at the event. Only the off-duty mercenaries were enjoying the drinks, taking part in various competitions. Laughing at his rival, the winner of the round called for a new challenger at the table. Seeing the bet, someone tossed a bag of coins onto the table to join in. Super excited, Damien shouted that he wanted to try too, sending Chenbi into a panic. Just then, an announcement was made, calling everyone to the awards ceremony. Before he could go, someone grabbed him by the collar to stop him. Dragging Damien along, Asta forced him to the awards ceremony. With a confident smile, he said it was time to collect his reward. Already on stage, the dean prepared to begin his opening speech. Announcing the start of the awards, he called the winners to the podium. Then, Dahlia of Dene was the first to be called for an award. Soon after, Damien von Blander was also called to the stage. Next, Evelyn of Plancher was the next name to be announced. When his name was called, Chenby got a little nervous. Finally, Asta was the last one called to receive his prize. As he walked onto the stage, he passed by Evelyn, the daughter from the merchant company. Watching the girl, he noticed something strange about her being there. When it was his turn, Chenby held out his hands to receive his grand reward. The box then revealed a very high-quality elixir as the grand prize. Handing over the box, the dean thanked Asta for his great contribution during the incident. With a smirk, he asked if he really had to give the box back. In response to the joke, the dean threatened to incinerate him along with the box. Smiling, he said he'd just burn the box secretly later then. With the ceremony over, the group went back to enjoying the festival. After all the chaos, they enjoyed a moment of rest at the festival. He then decided that for today it was okay to just relax a bit. As night fell, a firework was launched into the night sky. Immediately after, several fireworks exploded, lighting up the entire sky. Along with his friends, he watched the fireworks in the sky. With their backs turned, the three friends continued to watch the beautiful spectacle in the sky. He watched it all, admitting that despite the cost, the show was impressive. Closing his eyes, he just enjoyed that peaceful moment at the festival. Opening his eyes, he made up his mind, thinking he would do the same one day. Thinking of the future, he promised to hold festival when he built his great tower. Imagining his future, he said that a white wyvern would be a good companion. Suddenly, a mysterious white owl appeared at his bedroom window. Sitting on his bed, he said that's not the kind of owl he meant. He then carefully took the letter tied to the owl's leg. Reading the letter, he saw that the senior had summoned him to the usual place. The next morning, he jumped out the window, heading straight for the meeting. In the blink of an eye, he was running across the academy rooftops. Looking at the building, he commented on how worn down the place looked. He then approached the abandoned building, perfect for a secret conversation. Opening the door, he announced his arrival, and the dean confirmed his presence. He was met with the sight of the owl and a feather falling from the ceiling. Upon entering, he saw the place had been turned into a private office. The dean then offered Asta a drink. Already holding a cup, he poured the drink, reminding him that he had a favor to ask. Asta remembered that the favor had been exchanged for the pass to the Grand Library. The dean said the request was quite simple and took a letter from his pocket. Holding it out, he asked Asta to deliver the letter to a friend. Sensing trouble, he felt a bit uneasy about the request. Asking where he needed to go, he was told the fellow was very good at hiding. Then the dean revealed the destination, the dangerous Great Hammern Forest. Shocked by the revelation, he was visibly annoyed by such a dangerous destination. Being a dangerous place, the forest was full of monsters and magical materials. But the dean said it wouldn't be too difficult as there were people living there. Before he could speak, the dean mentioned he'd almost forgotten something. Showing a document, he revealed a reward of several high-quality elixirs. Then the dean asked what he was about to say before being interrupted. With a nervous smile, he said he was running late for his retirement from the academy. On a sunny morning, he prepares for his next big important mission. He looks at the letter in his hands, already well aware of his task. With a smile, he says just looking at the document makes him feel secure. Tallying the rewards, he now has 3 top-tier elixirs, which is incredible. Along with the elixirs, he also finds another item with the letter. He receives an artifact production voucher from the prestigious Iroquois workshop. He then realizes the veteran was hiding something much bigger from him. The dean explains that he originally planned to call the person back to the academy, but the guy said it would be awkward to return and that he had something to finish. He then tells Asta he'll have to go and help him settle his personal affairs. With a smile, he asks the dean if he has a conscience at all. He runs out of the academy, saying he managed to get even more compensation for the job. Glancing aside, he sighs, bracing himself for what's to come. He decides that, with so many elixirs, he doesn't need to focus on his mana right now. With that, he decides to use a mana limbs technique to strengthen himself. Remembering the past technique, he prepares to finally strengthen his weak body. His goal is to become a mage with the body of a knight. With a smile, he says he can aim even higher than before. Going to an isolated place, he finds the perfect spot for training. Sitting on the ground, he concentrates to begin the difficult strengthening process. With focused eyes, he says he's ready to finally start everything. Grabbing one of the elixirs, he swallows it in one go without hesitation. As he consumes the item, a powerful energy begins to flow through him. He focuses on his breathing, pouring every drop of mana directly into his body. His ultimate goal is to make the mana run through every joint, muscle, and nerve. Suddenly, the process causes excruciating pain that he can barely withstand. Recognizing the sensation, he shouts that the damn thing is back. His fire mark on his chest reacts, flaring to life intensely. Despite the pain, he manages to pull himself together, almost losing his focus completely. With a sinister smile, he realizes the fire mark has activated. Questioning the mark, he wonders what kind of encounter it will bring this time. Focusing on the plan, he now circulates the mana throughout his body. Injecting the mana into his muscles, he screams from the unbearable pain of the process. Writhing on the ground, he feels as if his muscles are being completely torn to shreds. Struggling in agony, he wonders if he should just stop right there. Shouting at the mark, he curses it for forcing him to go further. At that, the mark scolds him for forcing mana into his bones too soon. Completely exhausted, he finally manages to finish the painful physical strengthening process. Getting to his feet, he realizes the technique was a success, exceeding his expectations. Clenching his fist, he feels that his flesh is now strong enough. Smiling confidently, his dream of fighting like a knight becomes possible. To test his new powers, he decides to bite his own finger hard. With the open wound, he's shocked, saying he even went easy on himself. Observing the wound, he notices it will heal in about 15 minutes. Surprised by the speed, he realizes his regeneration is on a troll's level. With this bonus, he's now on the same level as the monster from Blander. Putting that aside, he turns to look at something strange on the ground. Crouching down, he notices a faint mana coming from the pool of blood there. He notes that the mana is familiar and that he can control it completely. Extending his hand, he decides to test his theory with a light spell. Concentrating the mana, he releases a powerful light spell from his hand. In shock, he realizes the caster of the spell was the blood, not him. With a sinister smile, he sees a new and insane potential in that ability. He thinks he can use the proliferation formula to regenerate blood and tissue. Deciding not to get involved, he plans to talk to Lancey at the right time. Satisfied, he decides to call this new ability blood magic. The scene changes, and he's in a cafe with Damien and Shenbi. Lancey appears relieved to see them well and asks if there's a problem. Extremely agitated, Damien shouts that he's fine and tells her to leave immediately. She then says that Lady Gamo asked her to pass on an important message. She says the message is about the proposal for the construction of Lake Blander. At this, she comments that the document's format was surprisingly proper and professional. He understands she's referring to his documents of blood, sweat, and tears. Taking a sip, she prepares to deliver Lady Gamo's official message. Anxious, Damien asks what the message is, hoping for a positive answer. She states bluntly that Damien's proposal was flat out denied by the family. With a smile, she says that despite the denial, it's not entirely impossible. Adjusting her glasses, she reveals that he needs to rank in the Academy's top 10. At this, Asta understands that Gamo's real objective was exactly this. Asta and Chenbi show up, and Lancey says they can help Damien with the task. She then promises that the Blander family will reward them handsomely for their help. Asta gets worried while Damien fills with hope at the new chance. Annoyed, he regrets getting involved in that proliferation formula situation. With a sinister smile, Damien says he understands and accepts the new challenge. The next day, they meet in the library to start studying. Asta asks Damien how well he understands magic, but Damien doesn't even know the basics. He then asks to see the notes, and Damien says he brought everything. Suddenly, a pile of new and used books is placed on the table. In shock, they realize the situation is a living hell for them. Asta asks if he turned in the assignments, and Damien throws the papers on the table. Chenbi is relieved, but Asta suspects something is very wrong. Looking at the papers, he sees they are nothing but meaningless scribbles. Annoyed, he closes his eyes, seeing his dream of a ritual slipping away. The only good thing is that Damien isn't bad at history and culture. The real problem is the magic classes, and Asta isn't confident he can teach him. Damien asks if the situation is that serious, not understanding the gravity of it. Suddenly, a voice calls out to Asta, and he turns to see who it is. A young woman introduces herself as Farayan. He corrects her, clarifying that he's Asta. She says she overheard their conversation and asks if he's going to help Damien. Saying she might be able to help, Farayan offers to take on the difficult task. Damien gets super excited, seeing a new hope for his big problem. Asking if she's for real, Asta hears that she's going to show him something. Showing some papers, she says she knew Chenbi would recognize this important document. With a smile, she reveals that it's a compilation of the most recent exams. Pulling out more documents, she warns that's not all she has. She boasts that she has summaries of every professor's exams right there. Analyzing the papers, Chenbi says that everything is much clearer to him now. Although suspicious, Asta realizes he has no choice but to accept. With a victorious smile, Farayan watches Asta, who holds himself back from retaliating. He then warns that despite everything, there is just one condition. His condition is that she help him with combat after the midterm assessment. Faced with this proposal, Asta is visibly interested in the deal. Snapping his fingers, he says he can help her right now in the training room. Confused by the response, he asks who the help would be for. Asking him to come along, she says she'll guide him to the location. Outside the academy, they arrive in the neighboring city, the City of Mist. He asks how much farther they have to go, and she replies that they're almost there. Going through several alleys, Asta follows her, starting to get annoyed. Walking ahead, she controls herself to keep from hitting him right then and there. Arriving at the spot, she announces this is it, leaving Asta surprised. Upon entering, he finds himself in a very luxurious private training center. Walking through the place, he comments that the owner must have a lot of money to spare. Wearing sunglasses, he now seems ready for serious business. A woman appears and welcomes them, calling Asta by his name. He then recognizes her as the noble student Dahlia of Denai. Farayan asks if it really has to be him, but Dahlia refuses to back down. She states that she has no intention of using her family's influence. Turning to Asta, she pleads with him to help her with this. In response to her request, he says he has a proposal for her. Pointing to Farayan, he says that Dahlia should use her for the training instead of him. In a panic, Farayan asks if Dahlia is actually considering that absurd proposal. Pointing at Asta, she says she already paid her part with the study materials. With a serious look, he reminds her that she still hasn't paid for what she did. With no choice, she accepts, while Dahlia just watches the scene in silence. Outraged, she steps back, saying she has no intention of going through with it. She shouts that she is a proud descendant of the Denai family with a will of her own. With a sinister smile, he challenges, asking if she's stronger than Exter. Clenching her fist, she bites her lip, controlling her anger to keep from exploding. Leaving the two of them, Asta says he doesn't have much time and needs to go. Sighing, he says that now Chenbi can relax a bit with the help. Turning to Dahlia, he asks if she wants to be trained in combat. Faced with the offer, she stares at him with a serious expression, saying nothing. Changing scenes, Asta is now in a restaurant getting ready to eat. As he cuts his meat, he reflects that there's no turning back for him now. Facing the plate of food, the conversation begins in a tense silence. She then picks up a piece of meat, eating calmly while watching him. With a smile, she asks Evelyn if he isn't trying too hard. Visibly nervous about the question, he just stares at her, not knowing what to say. She explains that complaints have increased because no one managed to get a bracelet in the hallway. Changing the subject, she mentions that the exam preparations will be finished next week. Shocked by this information, he asks if she wants him to steal the exam. She denies the accusation, saying she just expects him to help her with it. With a threatening look, she asks if he got the message. With nothing he can do, he remains tense, just listening to her orders. Leaving a piece of paper on the table, she tells him to go to the indicated location. Ending the conversation, she tells him to eat before his food gets cold. Back at the training center, he gets ready to start the lesson. Asta faces the mannequin, ready to start teaching Dahlia how to fight. He reflects on how their relationship has always been terrible. Remembering the past, he sees himself in a mortal battle against Dahlia. Back then, he almost killed her, but reinforcements saved her at the last second. Despite their past, he knows Dahlia suppressed Declan, which is useful. With a smile, he realizes he can move the timeline forward in his favor. He decides that now is the perfect chance to settle the score with her. Turning to Dahlia, he prepares to begin the real training. He asks what the most important thing is in a one-on-one fight. She says she just wants to learn the move he used against Exter. He then asks who would win between a rank 8 and a rank 9 mage. Raising a finger, he says her answer is completely wrong. Pointing to his head, he says the winner is the one who breaks the other's head first. Confused by his answer, she stares at him, trying to understand his strange logic. Focusing mana into his fingertip, he prepares to attack. Attacking quickly, he shows that the first strike is what wins the fight. After a long day, the sun finally begins to set on the horizon. Stretching, Chenbi complains that it's getting too late for them. Asa walks on, satisfied with the training and Dahlia's progress as a fighter. Suddenly, Chenbi asks what happened to Damien all this time. Evelyn approaches, making Chenbi awkward with his sudden presence. Asta teases him, asking about the 310 gold he spent. Changing scenes, Evelyn now walks alone, thinking about his current situation. He regrets having to steal the document, but he knows they won't leave him alone. Remembering their meeting, he knows Goldrin has enough power to force him. He sees the mission as a perfect opportunity to get what he wants. Arriving at the designated location, he prepares to start his new mission. Remembering the past, he gets annoyed at the street kid who got in his way. Confidently, he says that this time, everything will be completely different. As he opens the door, he finds Asta waiting for him outside. Entering the shop, he wonders if this is the right place as it looks normal. A smiling man approaches and asks what he would like to order. Stammering, Evelyn orders a hot and frozen dragon's horn tea. After ordering, he confirms this is the place he was told about. The man then hands over the tea and comments on Evelyn's surprise. With a smile, he explains that the place doesn't look like a black market on purpose. Looking around, Evelyn sees that the place looks like a normal tea house. The man asks how he found the place, and Evelyn tells him what he's looking for. He then says someone is selling and asks which department he wants. With a smile, the man says he'll meet the seller over the weekend. Evelyn is surprised, asking if he means they should go to the location together. He then realizes the man is trying to fully involve him in the plan. With nowhere to retreat, he agrees to go along to check the goods. At his response, the man just smiles and says it's all right. The man then says he will tell him the location and time of the meeting. Asa watches the scene through the window, preparing to act in secret. Suspicious, he calls the whole situation a load of obvious bullshit. He finds it very suspicious that a seller would appear just as a buyer shows up out of nowhere. Opening a portal, he decides he's going to see everything with his own eyes. Putting on a hood, he says he'll start by robbing the richest bastard. Back at the shop, the man waits for the next step of his plan. Sipping his tea, he plans to leave town as soon as the job is done. He wonders where he should go after stealing the exam papers. Suddenly, he hears a voice asking if he isn't serving customers. Turning around, he's startled to see a figure sitting in the chair behind him. He recognizes the mask as belonging to Declan's tiger, the Ruby Jade. Telling him to stop acting, Asta tells him to skip the whole charade. He then says he's looking for an item, a subspace bag. The man is shocked, realizing he's referring to Callahan's bag. Stammering, the man says he's never seen such an item around here before. Nervously, he lets out an awkward laugh, not knowing what to do in this situation. With a snap of his fingers, Asta silences him, telling him to be quiet. He then warns him that his head is too noisy when he thinks. Frightened, he realizes that Asta is no ordinary mage from the Declan faction. He gives in, saying he'll tell him everything about the boy from before. Asta tells him to explain everything as they head to the shop's warehouse. The man asks if he shouldn't also check the warehouse suspiciously. With a threatening look, Asta asks if he's hiding something from him. With no choice, the man just closes his eyes, completely terrified of Asta. Nervously, the man asks if they really need to go this far. Asta assures him that as long as it doesn't involve Declan, everything will remain secret. Given this assurance, he decides to tell the whole truth. He reveals that Evelyn commissioned the job, wanting to create a black market at the academy. Asta is surprised, recalling that everyone at the academy spoke highly of Evelyn. As someone with exemplary conduct, she maintained a good image with everyone. She also had great relationships with her peers, always smiling and being friendly. Being a model student, it was hard to believe she would do something like this. Angered by the injustice, his stomach churns at the whole situation. Arriving at the door, the man informs them that the warehouse is just ahead. Opening the door, Asta prepares to enter the secret shop storeroom. Upon entering, he finds a room filled with treasures and valuable items. Analyzing the items, he says the family needs to properly verify everything. Asking for 2 subspace bags, he says he'll take all the suspicious items. Panicked, the man curses at Asta. Realizing he's being completely robbed, Damien tells Chenbi to forget the formula as it's not necessary. Demonstrating the magic, he says his answer is also correct without the formula. Chenbi is shocked, asking how he maintains the spell without the stabilization formula. Frustrated with the argument, Chenbi declares that this place is a real hell. He realizes Damien is a genius, but one who defies common sense. From a distance, Farion worries if Asta is corrupting Dahlia with his ideas. Suddenly, a figure approaches, calling Furion by her full name. She turns around and is faced with Dahlia, whose face is all bruised. Furious, she screams at Asta, calling him a miserable good-for-nothing scumbag. After a week of intense studying, the team prepares for the test. Gathered at the table, they do a final review for the upcoming exam. Chenbi asks Farion about the part she corrected, and she confirms everything. Chenbi also says that everything he corrected was completely right as well. Damien gets super excited, shouting that now he can make blood, sweat, and tears. Annoyed, Farion says it was a week that didn't go by without blood and sweat. Celebrating his success, Damien shouts with joy for getting the questions right. Annoyed with the situation, Chenbi just grinds his teeth, saying nothing. Asking if he's okay, Farion calls out to Asta, worried about his reaction. Back in the present, Asta watches the city from a rooftop, scratching his ear. He wonders if someone is talking about him right now. He then turns, ready to put his grand plan into action. From the rooftop, he observes a group of students gathered on the street below. Seeing the tense debate, he feels an overwhelming urge to beat him senseless. He holds himself back, deciding not to cause a scene with Evelyn and debate right now. Standing on the street, Evelyn waits for someone, looking a bit impatient. Holding an orb, Asta says that now it's time for the big show. Elsewhere, the vendor explains the contents of the exam papers to everyone. A sealed envelope is placed on the table containing the most important information. The vendor confirms that the paper, the seal, and the pattern are all from the academy. Evelyn then says that, as promised, they will continue to give debate opportunities. Evelyn says they will make it clear that everything was thanks to debate. The vendor says he'll examine everything and that debate will distribute the papers. Saying their goodbyes, the vendor and his companion leave, closing the door behind them. Alone in the room, Evelyn just relaxes in her chair with a satisfied look. With a smile, she calls him an idiot, revealing her true manipulative nature. She then asks her lackey if the job is going well as planned. He says she must proceed without any mistakes as debate is disposable in their plan. She then invites him for a meal, and he thanks her for the invitation. Watching the scene through the window, Asta is shocked by Evelyn's rotten nature. He hides, thinking of a good way to ruin her plans. He sits at the table, thinking about how to handle this difficult situation. Tapping his fingers on the table, he ponders the best course of action. Suddenly, he has a brilliant idea to solve the whole problem. He says he's found a way to lead her down the right path. Grabbing a blank piece of paper, he prepares to put his new plan into practice. Carrying a stack of papers, he gets ready to start his secret plan. Sitting at the table, he starts writing, realizing his skills haven't gotten rusty. Remembering how he used to copy calligraphy, he focuses on doing a perfect job. After writing, he uses a seal to successfully finalize the forged document. Holding the paper, he says proudly that Evelyn is already becoming good. Back at the training center, night falls over the training grounds. Inside, Dahlia trains intensely against a training dummy without stopping. Focused on her training, she remembers that the fastest attack is the one that wins. With a determined look, she prepares a spell ready to crush her enemy. As the exam ends, the professor tells everyone to turn in their tests. The classroom buzzes with chatter as everyone discusses the exam they just finished. One student asks which theory was used, and another jokes in response. A student corrects the details on his test, reviewing formulas and symbols. A classmate praises him, saying he must have been studying in secret. Evelyn watches the scene, wondering if Deminin is really the genius he seems to be. With a smile, she celebrates the success of her first transaction of the day. She thinks about Deminin, the Viscount's son who controls the grain warehouses. She brags about having 4 deals like that, securing a huge profit. Suddenly, a hooded figure throws a paper dart in her direction. Startled by their appearance, she turns around, confused about what's happening. The figure reveals themselves, saying that Debay is another one of her many clients. He then calls out to Demonin, asking him to follow him somewhere. In a mysterious voice, he says the director is waiting for him. Confused and worried, Evelyn wonders what could be going on. The morning, an announcement calls everyone to an emergency meeting in the hall. The students gather, talking about a cheating scandal during the exams. Evelyn overhears the conversation, wondering who could have been responsible. She calms herself down, knowing she was meticulous and left no trace behind. The director calls for silence and begins to address all the students. A masked instructor announces that several students were caught cheating on the exams. Surprised, Evelyn realizes the rumors were true and that they're in big trouble. The instructor reveals that Debay and 4 accomplices have been identified and expelled. He continues saying that a student with a strong sense of justice uncovered everything. Extending his hand, he prepares to announce the name of the great hero. Calling Evelyn de Planche forward, he congratulates her on her courage and bravery. In shock, she denies doing anything, but everyone praises her for her modesty. Other students congratulate her, saying she doesn't need to be so humble about it. Laughing nervously, she tries to figure out what the hell is going on. As the ceremony begins, she realizes that everything is completely wrong and out of control. Watching the scene, Asta comments on how truly delicious the spectacle is to watch. With a forced smile, Evelyn hears the instructor tell her not to stray from the path. Giving her some advice, he names her the champion of lost causes and a benevolent judge. A week later, an announcement is made that the rankings have been posted. All the students rush to see their grades, creating a huge commotion. Damien and Chenby run desperately to see the results of their efforts. They reach the notice board, rushing to see the list of grades. Desperate, they ask about the final result of their intense studying. Seeing Damien's name in 18th place, they shout with pure happiness and relief. Asta then tells them to take a closer look at the grade list. He points out that Demonin is ranked much higher than Damien on the list. Suddenly, the instructor appears, saying he read the wrong line on the list. He then corrects the position, showing the true grades of all the students. With the correction, the list now shows Damien in 16th place. Shouting with happiness, Damien and Chenby celebrate the success of their hard work. With the mission accomplished, Asta says he can finally collect his great reward. A voice calls out to him, and he turns to see who it is. It was Chenby, who brags that maybe he has a talent for teaching others. Suddenly, a dark voice tells him to shut up, scaring him. Embarrassed, Asta wonders if he accidentally said that out loud. Asta then asks if he knows about an assistant's involvement in the cheating scandal. He explains that the poor guy sold the answers just to get by. Asta asks if he knows how long it takes for an assistant to become a professor. Chenby says he heard from Professor Perrin that it takes about 3 or 4 years. Asta then asks if he really wants to become a professor at that academy. Super excited, Damien shows up shouting about blood, sweat, and tears everywhere. Asta says that if he really wants to teach, there's only one way. With a smile, he says Chenby must become a super powerful archmage. He adds that way he can train students mercilessly and rigidly. Imagining himself as an archmage, Chenby is inspired by Asta's idea. With a smile, Asta says that if you're going to dream, you should dream big. He adds that Chenby must become an archmage so he can pay him back. As night falls, the sky is starry and calm with few clouds. In a nearby town, Asta prepares to meet an important person. He approaches a shop with a wooden sign in front of the door. Opening the door, he enters the place, ready for the scheduled meeting. A mysterious figure walks toward a room in the back of the shop. Inside, he finds a hooded person waiting for him in the darkness. The man reveals himself, saying he finally showed up for the meeting. Sitting at the table, the two trade jabs about their lifestyles. Asta says he needs his help and asks if he can infiltrate. The man reveals that ancient ruins have been discovered in the Hamlin forest. Faced with this revelation, Asta just stares at him in silence for a moment. With a sinister smile, he realizes this is going to be a huge headache. A few days later, Lancy meets with them to deliver the promised reward. She says it's nothing difficult and that she'll give them a high-level formula. With a smile, Asta realizes this was an unexpected and very welcome gain. She then reveals she has investigated Chenby, making him a little tense at the revelation. Asking about his family problems, she hears that things are getting a little better. With a smile, she says that House Blander can solve everything for him. She continues, saying they can even offer a better environment for his family. Despite the offer, he refuses, saying everything is fine for now. She tells him not to feel burdened by her offer. With a smile, he says he just wants to stay friends with Damien forever. Sipping his tea, Damien is visibly embarrassed by his friend's statement. Lancey is surprised, then gives a small smile at his response. Asta watches the scene, feeling like he's the only piece of trash present. Chenbi then asks if he can request something else instead of help with his family. He asks to study magic at House Blander, and she asks if that's all. With a smile, Chenbi confirms he'll gladly accept her offer. Elsewhere, Lady Gamo is in a garden with her butler, Alfredo. He confirms that Damien's friend did indeed say those words at the meeting. With a smile, she says Damien is lucky to have such a friend. She then hands over a document, sealing a new deal with Chenbi's family. Shocked, Chenbi reads that House Blander has become his family's patron. He turns his back, still processing the unexpected news he just received. With that, the evaluation ended with satisfactory results for everyone involved. As time passes, Asta continues his studies and plans at the academy. Standing on stage, Instructor Jaira prepares to make an important announcement. She announces that from this day forward, they will enter a preparation period. All general classes will be suspended with a full focus on practical combat from now on. She warns, however, that all training will be left to the student's discretion. A student raises her hand asking for clarification on the part about discretion. The instructor confirms they can choose whether or not to attend the preparation classes. She continues, saying they can also return to their homes to train. Asta ponders this, hearing that combat mages will be invited to the preparation classes. He's suspicious, sensing the teachers are hiding something with this sudden change. At night, the dean's owl flies through the sky, carrying another important message. Asta receives the note, which tells him to meet the dean at 8. Standing in the darkness, he wonders what the hell happened to warrant this summons. Walking through the forest, he prepares to meet the dean at the arranged location. He's surprised, wondering why everything changed so suddenly. Arriving at the location, he sees the dean has turned the place into a hideout. He realizes that, with so much space, he can test his new multiplication formula. Cutting his finger, he uses a drop of blood to initiate the technique. Several drops of blood multiply, and he confirms that the formula works. He notes that the replicas mirror the original, but their magical power is insufficient. Suddenly, the dean appears, asking what the hell he's doing there. The dean notices that the mana inside the drop seems to be Ace's. Confirming the suspicion, Asa shows the dean the power of his blood drops. Shocked by the demonstration, the dean is left completely speechless by what he sees. He asks about the technique's range and where Asa got it from. Surrounded by the drops, Asta just silently observes the dean's reaction. With a smirk, he says he'll tell him everything if the dean grants him a favor. The dean understands, realizing Asta wants him to serve as a training dummy. Asta says he's the perfect punching bag for the test he's about to run. Telling the dean to put his guard up, he prepares for the attack. He closes his eyes, concentrating to initiate the next phase of the technique. He then begins to fuse the rubies, accumulating an enormous amount of mana. Terrified, the dean shouts for him to stop. Sensing the imminent danger of the attack, he yells, cursing Asta for preparing such a powerful and destructive attack. With a sinister grin, Asta says that true art is a grand explosion. He then unleashes all the accumulated power, creating a gigantic explosion on site. After the dust settles, the area is completely devastated by the powerful blast. Standing amidst the smoke, he says the power was a bit disappointing. The dean then appears, walking slowly toward him on the ground. Asking where he came from, the dean says Asta's power is incomprehensible. Unfazed, he just stares back at the dean with a calm, serious expression. He says he's just an ordinary person, and the dean retorts with a threat. The dean asks where the red orbs came from, ignoring the strange magic. With a smirk, he flips the dean off, saying they're right here. A mysterious smoke fills the area, creating a sudden scene transition. The dean's owl appears, unexpectedly landing on Asta's head. Asta asks why he was summoned, and the dean says it's about the forest. Placing an orb on the table, he tells them to watch before they talk. Watching the orb, Asta sees an image slowly forming inside it. Shocked by the vision, he asks what that is, completely